Hello again, my fellow Westorians. How are you all? We're happy to see you. It is Wednesday. It is a little past 7 Eastern Standard, and we have a lot of Game of Thrones action to talk about. This episode had a lot of implications for the books, which is a little unusual for a battle episode because sometimes the battles, like the Battle of the Bastards, for example, not a lot to do with the books, for example. The Blackwater, a lot to do with the books. It's kind of, there's a range, so you can't really tell. And this battle being so far after the point of the books we're at, well, that just makes it all confusing even more. That said, there is a lot of major implications for this battle. There are things like character deaths, as in, or another way to say character deaths is completed character arc. It's a more PC way to say that someone's dead. There's symbolism and endgame implications. Smaller things like battle strategies versus the Army of the Dead that we might see used in the books, at least to some degree. Not a lot of them, but some of them maybe. And the variety of topics that we have in this episode is pretty substantial. But as it turns out, a lot of these subtopics are things that we've covered in depth in our scripted episodes. And I'm not just talking about us at History of Westeros. I'm talking about Radio Westeros. You guys have covered Melisandre and The Long Night and other things like that, haven't you, Lady Gwyn?
Yeah, we certainly have. Those two episodes were some of our earliest episodes going on 5 years ago now. So we have a lot of thoughts about that as well.
That's cool, yeah. And on our end, we'll be dropping a few other hints for episodes that cover things that once we get to them, and same with Radio Westeros when we come along those. Because you'll see, it's really cool. We're touching on a lot of subjects today. As it turned out, too, we had too much material for this episode. So
yeah, we did.
We're developing a little bonus episode from some of this material that's going to relate to the prophecy coverage. So we'll talk a little bit about more of that during the episode, but yeah, good news for everyone. We have so much to say that it's not going to fit in this episode. So let's start off with a couple simple things, get into some announcements, and then we'll get into the meat of it. One of the things we always like to start with, not always like to start with, but we can easily point to whenever you feel down about the show, or if you just want to feel great about the show. One of the best things you can think about is the music. It's pretty hard to maintain a perfect 10 out of 10 average, but I'd say Ramin Djawadi has managed to pull that off somehow. It just never isn't like perfect, right, Lady Gwyn?
Absolutely. How about that? The Yoke Boy pointing this out to me. There's this really like Fury Road kind of music during that battle scene after the lines broke, where everything is very chaotic. And then when the Night King starts to raise their own dead, that scene starts with this really somber piano piece, which is called The Night King. And I'm sure I'm not alone in feeling that was such a powerful piece. It was a real callback to The Light of the Seven from the episode when, Cersei blew up the sept, which was also phenomenal music. It's absolutely unforgettable.
That piano piece, you like that piano piece, huh?
Yeah, I'd like and dislike it. I'd say I probably can just, think about the notes of that piano piece and cry. So good job, Satan.
Yeah, good job, Satan. I love it, Satan.
And that song is actually called The Night King. So yes, good job.
And I like that catch about the being similar to Light of the Seven. Yeah, the piano, the very distinct piano featured there. That's a nice call. That really does make it feel like Satan, doesn't it? You get the Light of the Seven, which is sort of heaven-like, and you got this guy. This guy. And another thing they pretty much always get right, I wouldn't say maybe not 100% of the time, but pretty darn close, is even when it makes no sense at all, it looks amazing. And I'm not one of those people that says it rarely makes sense. I'm more in the middle that I find positive things and negative things to say.
Yeah, so, I'd say, There were criticisms of how this episode looked. I was
Yeah.
one of the people criticizing it, and and it's sure, you can calibrate your TV or you can change the settings, and I did so when I watched it on my monitor. I could turn the brightness up and it made it better, but you shouldn't have to do it. But there were a couple of shots that definitively, no matter who you were, I think you were like, this is gorgeous. And two of the shots for me were these two. I really liked the shot and a couple other shots like it of all the all of the Dothraki screamers charging into battle.
So cool.
It's just the fire. It helps. The fire lights it up and all of that.
Yeah, it gave us a little more light. I was like, thanks, Melisandre.
More fire, please.
Yeah, more fire, please. But this other one did not have light at all to add on to it. And it's obviously the shot of Drogon and Rhaegal above the clouds, like this moment of peace above. And it's just absolutely stunning. How we couldn't, talk about this episode, even though this is our book to show episode and we're not really covering this sort of thing per se. I couldn't let it go by.
And we didn't have time to do images on Monday because of how late we got back from the convention, which anyone watching, I guess you may notice a pattern with our T-shirts here. I don't know. I can't really put my finger on what the pattern is.
Right now, it's the gang went to Ice and Fire Con.
So a few words about Ice and Fire Con at the mid-roll break, but we have a lot to cover, so we won't linger too much, even though we loved it so much. So the imagery was fantastic, but as Ashaya said, it's not exactly our focus here. Mm-hmm. A couple of announcements, like I said, then we'll get into the meat of it. After the season is over, I want to remind everybody, big thanks to everyone who's a patron. And after the season, we're moving our bonus episodes up to the higher price point of $5 a month, which seems to be kind of the industry standard, quote unquote. But if you get in before that, you get grandfathered in. So if you come in for less than $5 now, you still get to keep all those bonus episodes and, at that lower rate. So now's the time. 3 more weeks or so of that discounted rate. So thanks to a couple of our key patrons whose level entitles them to a shout out. That includes Jeff Gnarly, the Long Snapper, History of Westeros' first sword, as well as our Dragon Rider patrons, the stalwart Talanis the Talon, King of Gagassos, Rider of Telarius, a red dragon with scales, horns, and talons of midnight black. It's too bad there's no red dragon in the show, because red dragons are so cool looking, but they're also kind of the cliche.
To be fair, they really made Drogon a red dragon in the show.
That's true.
You see his wings, he's got a lot of red to him.
He's reddish black. Yeah, he's black with distinct red. You're right. Yeah. That's true. There's a lot of red on him. And also Robert IV of House Ardeacor, Burned King of Blazewater Bay, Rider of Atraxis, a black dragon with bioluminescent spots like smoldering embers and a banded blue tail. Right on, folks. Okay, let's go to, let's see, our next announcement, which is we should have the normal schedule the rest of the season. Monday, Wednesday, 7 p.m., maybe starting a few minutes late like today, but roughly 7 p.m. Eastern. And 2 p.m. on Saturday, we'll back to that. No more being out of town during the season. We'll be in place for the rest of it. There's a small chance we make a slight change to accommodate a guest, but, nothing like a 3-hour difference like we had on Monday. Unless something truly unforeseen happens, like months ago when the Sea Snake episode was canceled because our internet was just completely unusable. Or like the Army of the Dead showing up at our house. That would probably stop us temporarily,
Maybe slow you down.
I do, despite our schedule being more regular the rest of the way through, I do still recommend hitting that notification bell button in the bottom right to get notified whenever we go live, just in case we decide to drop an extra one, or in case you lose track of time and staying notified. Then you don't have to worry about it. Hit that like button while you're at it, and also subscribe to Radio Westeros on YouTube. The link is in the description. I want to talk just for a second about conflict resolution, and this is something that matters to me a lot because I frankly argue a lot, you do. I do. I argue. I'll readily admit it. It's been something I've done since I was a little kid, and I try to be fair with it. I try to be rational, but I lose my temper sometimes. And a lot of people, I bring this up because a lot of people are arguing on social media about this right now. So I'm going to use myself as an example. I'm going to hold myself up as an example of both what not to do and what to do after you do what you shouldn't do. So I've had some debates that got more like arguments with some of our fellow creators. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't, no one called anyone names. No one was like, oh, you're stupid. Oh, I hate you. Nothing like that. It didn't rise to that level. But, it got intense. And in both cases, there were two of these. We had a private conversation afterwards, resolved it, no problem. Back to talking like best buds. I really hope that a lot of you guys who are arguing with your friends out there can do the same thing I did and dial it back and remember that we're all friends here. So I would be a hypocrite if I said I didn't do this. I'm part of the problem, but I'm also trying to be part of the solution by using myself as an example. So enough about that. Let's love each other. All right, Bran and Theon. Let's start there. A couple of cool theories about what was going on. I think a lot of people are a little confused. What exactly was he doing? What was he just watching the Night King, or was there something to it? What do you think, Lady Gwen?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that on first watch, I kind of felt like the Ravens might be a little pointless, but you suggested that perhaps they're being used as a lure, as even further bait. If Bran was bait, then Bran and Raven as ravens in the sky is even more bait. It's I think that makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, otherwise there didn't seem to be a real point to what he was doing there. I really do hope that there's something a little more satisfactory to Bran's arc, other than him just being bait.
Yeah.
So much of what he's seen so far seems to be focused on other things like RLJ, for instance. So we have to kind of think in our heads, how can we resolve that, not only with this episode, but going forward, and just maybe hope we get to see a little more of what Bran's up to when he's off in his head.
Yeah. I think, I mean, he was bait, but before this episode, and this is something I want to hit hard on throughout this episode, not everything that people did that was essential to stopping, the long night happened in this episode. And so that's something that's going to take a lot more consideration going forward, looking back at what people have done. But you consider, Bran shared information. He gave Arya the dagger. There's things that he did that were important. And we have to view, I think, each character and think about what they did that was pivotal. But that said, I do still think that there is, definitively, obviously, so much more to the Bran plot line in the books.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great point. And to back up what y'all are saying, if we want to get real detail oriented, which of course we do, when the ravens fly out, when Bran flies out there with those ravens, he flies towards Night King, sees Night King, and that's the first time we see Night King in the battle, and then he enters it. It appears, you could say, well, maybe he was throwing he waited for Jon and Dany to approach, and then hit them with that ice storm to throw them off, just as they were approaching the White Walker lines there. And you could also argue that, well, hey, doesn't he already know where Bran is because of the mark? Well, sure, but is it like a precise GPS location, or is it just kind of a general, he's down there somewhere?
So, I mean, an example is I can use Find My Phone for my, phone, and it'll tell me it's in my house, and I know it's in my house, but I can't.
It's not like it's under the couch, right? Yeah, it's not that precise. So
look in the couch cushions.
Maybe we're stretching it, but I don't think that's unreasonable that he wouldn't know exactly where Bran is. He would just know that he's kind of in the vicinity.
But specifically what he does there is Bran, looks to him like that, and then Night King, stretches his powers and is like, okay, I'm gonna control all of these whites and come for you.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah, he took over the whites. That's when he made the specific, ordered them to make the human bridge there, the corpse bridge. Other than before that, they were just standing there kind of on their own, whatever default mode whites have, whatever that means. So, yeah, definitely more to come on Bran. There's a lot of questions about him. We're not going to do too much on predictions about Bran right now. There's going to be a talk of that on Saturday
and on this Prophesied Heroes
bonus
episode.
Absolutely. The bonus episode will have that as well. We need a little more time to think it through, to be frank. I don't have a lot of great answers right now. Shay's got some stuff, but it could use a little more marinating as well, probably.
I certainly can. I mean, I can't resist it. I'm going to get into some of it in this episode, but the bulk of it we are going to cover hopefully really soon in a shorter episode.
Yeah. So the last moment, let's talk about Theon. Probably, I don't know. It's hard to say. Everybody likes different characters, but Theon's death might have been the one that was the most major of a character death. Because Melisandre is maybe equal to him, but
Melisandre, about it in terms
Melisandre.
of who's a POV character.
Okay, yeah, that's a
Think
good
about it in
point.
those terms.
And
Those
Mel
two
technically is, but she's had
Those
one
two
chapter.
are, but I just mean she has fewer POV characters. So I'm saying that it had adds to your point.
Yeah.
That those are the two most major character deaths.
And Theon wasn't someone we knew would die. Like Melisandre told everybody, "I'm going to die in this strange country." So even though her prophecies are wrong, sometime that one felt right, and it certainly was. So, Lady Gwen, tell us your thoughts on Theon's arc, please.
Many, many thoughts on Theon's arc. So I'll try to be brief. We've been mentioning that our conviction going back to when we covered Theon that he was going to do something heroic. We still do expect a very similar resolution in the books. And even though it didn't play out in the show the way I thought it might, I do stand by the prediction that in the books, the Weirwood, possibly obsidian-tipped arrows will come into play, because if you think about Bran's vision of Brandon Snow, or at least what we assume was Brandon Snow, not being included in the show, the dark-eyed youth, pale and fierce, slicing 3 branches off the weirwood and shaping them into arrows. If we think about that in terms of Theon, it really fits. Still lots of book implications here, even though it doesn't play out the same way. And I want to say that I am suggesting that Theon go down in history as the drowned wolf. That's going to be my kind of headcanon for
I like it.
Brave Theon. And also want to point out a very big book callback that occurred to me in that moment when he charged the Night King. And the Night King just kind of, real slowly and, lazily just, ran him through. Immediately I thought of that moment in the Game of Thrones prologue where it says the other's parry was almost lazy as he, concluded his duel with Waymar Royce. So
right on.
Another callback, one of many in this episode.
Good catch. Yeah, that final moment when Arya stabs Night King there's a lot that comes full circle. You got Theon's arc comes full circle right before, and you get reminded of him saving Bran with his arrows in that very early scene in the woods with Robb, and you have the cat's paw dagger. The circle is complete there. It's being used to kill Bran, then being used to save him. You have the dragon glass driven into the Night King's heart, and Arya stabs him in the heart with the dragon glass with the cat's paw dagger. So just so many things. Even though I know there's a lot of plotting issues with that scene, I definitely gotta hand it to them for putting so much into that moment, even though it's got some flaws. The pro and con list, if we're divided that way, the pro list is pretty high, even though the con list has quite a few line items as well. So, Ashea, we noticed a little other character, a little sadness here.
Sadness. I would assume so. Obviously, Alice Karstark. We note her. We don't know much about her in the show at all, but we do see her going with Theon, taking Bran to the Godswood as part of the group of people that are going to protect him. And ultimately, we see that Theon is, basically the last man standing, just piles of bodies all around him. So it seems like a safe assumption that she died, but I really would love it if someone survived who could have borne witness to Arya killing Night King, as someone who was hiding in the Godswood.
Because Bran's not going to get excited about it. He's
Bran's not going to brag about this, but I really want someone to be like, and then she did this, and it was epic.
Yeah, she ran behind the tree and was just hiding. She crawled up in the branches. She's like, "Whew, that was close." She's like, "I was only up here because it's a better place to shoot my arrows from. I wasn't hiding." Yeah.
Well, think about in the books. Oh gosh, what's his name? Wex.
Yeah,
right?
Wex Pike.
Wex Pike hiding. He was hiding up in the weirwood tree, watching He was the one that observed
The sack.
the sack and
Yeah,
the
see,
group
I
leaving,
think
so.
it's not that like dumb at all for her. Just
No.
like for someone out of there, just be like, someone should be up. Some people should be in the trees shooting down,
Yeah.
and they're less likely to get got. But
There's a little bit of hope.
Little hope.
For little Alice.
Very little bit.
Yeah, so you kind of wonder. It's probably not going to come up much in the show. Maybe we'll get a line or two, but that's as much as we can hope for. Most likely, that they'll talk about what's going to happen in the North now, the aftermath. Just from little things like, well, maybe not little thing, like cleaning up all those bodies. Like, damn, that's a lot of bodies. To
I wonder what they're gonna do with all those dragon remains, like Viserion's undead body. Like some of that's really useful, valuable stuff.
Do cool stuff with those bones, and I don't know. Danny might find that rather macabre.
Yeah, but, I don't know, but
still, she'll have to live with it,
and or die with it.
Yeah, or die with it. Yeah. And what are they going to do with the wall? Just settle north of the wall now? Like they don't need it anymore, or wildlings are just going to kind of come and go freely between that huge gap. A little interesting questions like that.
How short is winter now?
Yeah.
Is it?
The season's normal
ends. Like it just started.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, whoa, winter was really quick this year.
Yeah.
They said it was going to be long, but it was not.
They said it was going to never end.
Now you mess it up even more. There's never going to be a winter. There's just going to be summer forever, which I don't know if that's that good either. Okay, let's take our first set of questions. Bunch of super chats piling up and some other regular questions. As we've been doing lately, we've switched our format just a little bit to take questions in bunches rather than just jumping in every once in a while with questions. Mm-hmm. Seems a little more organized this way.
A little bit.
First question is one with no name. Says, what are the chances of Bran becoming the new Night King via the mark he received from the Night King touching his bare arm? Looks like Azor Ahariya could have been protected by her clothing. Yeah, first of all, yes, big ups on that name. I like calling her Azor Ahariya. And I also agree with the clothing thing. I mean, we don't know how Night King's touch works. We don't know if it works on, like it's different, his touch, whether the thing is dead or not. I don't know. There's definitely a chance for some little epilogue-y type thing with Bran Night King's mark. But what do you guys think? You think that'll go anywhere?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say I don't think so. But if it happens, I'll roll with that too. But my gut reaction is I think that was it, and I'll go into why based on thematically later into the episode. But
okay. And LG?
Yeah, pretty much the same. I think that the Night King's actual creation was probably. I mean, we saw it was a bit more complex than that. Although we don't know, whatever the mechanism he used to turn Craster's sons into his companions, but like Shea said, I would roll with it if that's what happened, but thinking probably not.
Cool. All right, next super chat is from Strange TV. For my favorite podcasters, keep up the good work. See y'all next year. Yes, my friend, very nice to meet you out there. All three of us enjoyed your presence, and we're glad you're coming back. It was great times, and you fit right in. Super chat from Miska D, no question. Thank you very much. From Matthias Bosveld, apologize if I said your name wrong. He says, great, home late and able to watch live from Holland. Isn't much of the criticism based on the fact that the predictions turned out to be wrong? I'd say part of it.
I think some of it is. I don't think all of it is.
Yeah, not all of it. There's a lot of fair criticisms for sure. We had several.
I had fair criticisms that I felt less strongly later, realized I didn't care that much about. I cared about right afterwards. And then ultimately I was like, this doesn't really matter.
Yeah. And when you see everybody arguing so much, it's kind of like, do I really want to add to that? Well, I did, but that's my point earlier, but maybe I shouldn't have.
I don't think I got in a single, I guess I got in a slight argument with you, Aziz, in the car, and I just stopped talking.
I don't remember what that was about.
Exactly. It was something so unimportant. That's why I stopped talking. I was like, I don't even care about.
Good call.
It was like, we were arguing about whether the battle, whether it was realistic for characters to have died right then. And you were saying that they always do that in all TV shows, and I was like, "Yeah, you're right," but it still bothered me.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, I definitely I will never, or never should never tell someone that not to like something.
But
or to like
so
something,
I was critical of that, and I predicted characters would die, and they didn't die. But I wasn't criticizing because my predictions were wrong, just because I really think that those characters should have died.
Yeah, there's also a double whammy here, because a lot of people are making predictions based on book expectations, and so when your prediction is wrong and the book stuff doesn't make the show, it's kind of doubly disappointing. And I think maybe what Mattis is getting at here too is there's definitely some people that really, really, I don't know, they get kind of attached to their predictions. You know, we don't really get that attached to our predictions around here. We like to just throw out a bunch of them and say, hey, look at all these fun possibilities. And, you know, when they don't happen or do, we sometimes pat ourselves in the back or say we were wrong, and that's not a big deal. But sometimes people get really attached to their predictions, and it can be annoying when they don't happen. What do you think, Lady Gwen? Do you have a take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's criticism. There are criticisms that I had immediately afterwards, which I've definitely moderated on after rewatching. I had a lot more of a nuanced point of view, but I still have, I think, valid criticisms. And you make a good point that it's sometimes hard for us that read the books very deeply to separate the books and the show, or to remember what has been in the show that, you know, from the books, that sort of thing. But the valid kind of criticisms, you know, which I'll talk more later about some of my disappointments in the portrayals of Sansa, that have to do not so much with the you know, the book material, but just the way the show has actually portrayed her, and, you know, some of the things that maybe were missed opportunities, even just strictly going by the show. So that's the sort of stuff that's valid, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well said. Next super chat is from B Word. How do people think the Long Night was ended before? Could it come again? Could the children have made more Night King warriors?
Well, as for the first two questions, really, we're going to get into that a little bit later, so I think we'll hold off on addressing that.
Yeah, we will. But the last question, I don't know about more Night King warriors. The way it seems to have been done in the show is Night King made everyone after him, maybe, because the way they spelled it out, if you know the origin, it's like the vampire thing: kill the original vampire and all the ones die. But that might be a small plot hole here. Like, how did they defeat Night King and banish him to the point where he could come back? Because this wasn't a banishing. This is like, that dude's dead, you know? So I don't know. The way it's set up, it seems like the Long Night is just done for. But
which maybe is an argument for why people theorize about Night King not really being completely gone or being a misdirect, which, like I said, I can understand.
Yeah. He repops in the north in his home base.
Yeah, he's just -1 health. Like.
Yeah, he has more lives. He has an extra guy.
It has to happen over 1,000 times before finally.
4 blasts mean, or 3 blasts mean the others are coming. 4 blasts means the Night King is repopped.
Yes.
Like, damn it! You hear that music? That's the Night King got another life sound. Damn it. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing, because if he was defeated in the past, then he was defeated in a way that didn't kill him, which is kind of hard to, like, what happened? So that is the kind of thing that we could very much expect the prequel show to get into if it's picked up, which we can't get too excited about it because it may not happen. But I think it's got a very good shot. Very good shot. From Dornish Dan, what good is a depository of the human experience if no one can access it? How to make Bran less cryptic? Good question. It feeds into what is Bran going to do now, and what's his role going to be? Is he just going to like send ravens down there and spy on King's Landing? Because that's something. but that doesn't really answer this question at all. Yeah, what is his? How are people going to access these human memories? Is he going to be kind of like a dude sitting around, like ask the Green Seer? You know, comes to hold counsel every once in a while and just sits there being wise, or I don't know. What do you think, Lady Gwen?
Well, I mean, I'd like to see. I don't really know what they're going to do with Bran. I mean, this is one of the things that kind of troubles me. How to make him not only less cryptic but relevant. You know, once this experience has passed, he doesn't seem like he's going to be, you know, sitting there spouting wisdom to everyone. He's not really that kind of character. So, I'm not sure. I'm kind of taking, as far as the show is concerned, definitely taking a wait and see.
Yeah. Good question, Dornistan. You threw us for a
Yes.
loop on that one. Maybe you have to come back to that. I'll have to think.
I keep thinking about just the idea of bittersweet endings and the destruction of humanity destroying itself, which again we'll go into later. Just Bran makes it all this way, he does all this, and he just still ends up just dying.
Maybe he's able to pass some things on, they can write some books.
He told Tyrion that story, he maybe said some other things, but ultimately by the end of the series, like the end of the show, he's been killed. No, I don't know if that's what I think strongly, but as of where the show's, and I don't know that that's what I think the books will do, but where the show has Bran, it's hard for me to imagine him anywhere, really. I can't see a place for him.
Okay. From Of Wolf and Raven. Is it possible the Night King's soul is now in the dagger, similar to how Nissa's soul entered Lightbringer? Could we see Cersei stabbed and turn Night's Queen? That seems a bit too maybe high magic because they haven't. It's not necessarily foreshadowed. I don't know that they've shown the soul thing as a major plot point in the show. It's kind of referenced as a part of the prophecy, but I like this idea. I think it's a neat idea, but I'm kind of cynical on its chances of happening in the show. What do y'all think, Lady Gwyn?
Yeah, I kind of like the idea, but it almost seems to me like one of those times when we are looking for more sort of complexity in the show, because we're used to how deeply complex the books are, and like you said, they haven't really set anything like that up, or any precedent, or so yeah. I mean, the thought of it is creepy as heck, but I don't know. I wouldn't expect that much. I don't think we have enough time.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea for the concept that I think it applies to the books nicely, because we definitely get, you guys have covered Valyrian steel on your show, and there's it's not just a theory, it's almost solid evidence at this point that it takes human sacrifice to make Valyrian steel. And that's a similar concept. That if you need a dead person or a human sacrifice, that's a euphemism for needing their soul going into it, in a sense. So I don't know. There's some. I don't think it's going to play out exactly this way, but the concept is very interesting and definitely applies to the books in some way. The Prince That Wasn't Promised. 3 different super chats. Thank you very much. That's very generous. Sorry I'm late. Had mod duties on Kyle's stream. For the Realm. Hit that like button, folks. Starting to think Qyburn creates more White Walkers somehow. Well, I'll start off by saying thank you and shout out to Azora Hype. That's Kyle, our friend over there in Canada, where it's also kind of cold right now. Probably no one's going to kill the Night King of Canada, make it warm anytime soon. But it's April, it's May, so it's warming up. Now, as far as Qyburn goes, God, this really interesting book-wise. Is Qyburn really going to stop at one undead creature? Maybe, but you could definitely see him kind of wanting to make more. I don't know about White Walker beings, but more undead? What do y'all think? Is that... it's kind of like hard to think of who he could animate, but there's,
We're gonna
he's fascinated by it,
We all wanted to see Arya in the Sand Snakes.
Oh dear.
If he really wants to, make some badass undead, he needs to go on over to Skagos and get some undead unicorn goat things. That's fearsome. Okay, let's see. Next question. Vampirus 99, book versus show continuity issue. D&D never discussed history of the crypts and the swords of dead Stark lords. When the dead rise in the show, it makes House Stark look really dumb. It's like, doesn't House Stark of all houses know better than not to bury their dead? We actually brought this up in our Crypts of Winterfell episode. It's kind of funny. Like, of all the only houses, like of all the houses that shouldn't. So I'm not sure it's even just a show problem. It's just kind of a little odd to me in the first place.
There's a couple of things there. One is the idea that out of that long of a period of time, that there wouldn't be anything there unless they were mummified. However, in the behind the scenes, the game revealed they talked specifically about wanting to make sure that whatever whites came out of the crypts looked mummified, as if the Starks were, like, doing that, which is a thought of its own. Two is the theory or the idea that people have had that there is some sort of warding or magic or something going on in the crypts of Winterfell. They have their swords, that there is a reason why, like, that the Starks down in the crypts of Winterfell are safe from this exact situation, perhaps.
Okay.
So I think there's a couple of angles you could think about this from.
That makes sense. Yeah. I do think that whatever happens in the books is going to be a little more interesting than what happened in the show. I don't think it was uninteresting, but it wasn't. I don't think it was one of the better. See, the action part of it.
No, it was not nearly as bad as I thought it would look. I thought, if you're listening to the show, you remember me worrying about like skeleton whites as kind of silly, as there was during the Jojen death scene. I was picturing that all over again, and they didn't do that, but it also was pointless, basically entirely, just utterly pointless, and. Yeah.
Have y'all seen the social media post going around with the picture of the girl that kind of looked like Shireen? And they're like, she didn't do anything. She didn't defend the crypts. What a liar, that little girl.
She didn't die, which we all predicted.
That's true, right? Yeah. Talk about subverting expectations. Right. We really wanted that little girl to die, damn it. Well, she'll just die next episode. Like a loose stone's going to fall on her head. And it's like, oops.
Oh, sorry, I forgot about that one.
From Fred Targaryen's Uncle Daddy, still one of the better names.
Yeah, he says, and this is addressed to me, are we going to talk about Sam wimping out, or is Ashaya too big of a Sam fan to cover that? This is exactly why I love Sam Tarly. You clearly do not understand Sam fans if you don't understand that Sam, is George R. R. Martin. He is the reader, like the average fan. We are not amazing fighters. If we were in this scene, I would be shocked to see you, Fred Targaryen's Uncle Daddy, do any better than this.
I don't know.
And I would do a hell of a lot worse than Sam did
I think Fred Targaryen's Uncle Daddy would kick some ass, but hey, we'll see.
But so that is my rebuttal to that, is that in seeing that, I was even more endeared to Sam, and I loved him even more. Like, of course he wimped out.
And that's why they started with him, too. Like, the first person's perspective we get is the most, like, the person who would most, like, be us if we were in that spot. Like, the terrified, like, I want to help, but am I really capable?
Yeah, which is...
So. And I want to say that was not my impression at all. Like, every time I saw Sam, all I thought was, oh my God, he's being so brave. Because you know who Sam is, and so for him to even be there and not in the crypts when he had been specifically released to go hide with the other non-fighters, for him to take that step and be there.
Yeah. And I thought it was
his brothers.
Yeah.
It was very important. I thought that they started us off with this long tracking. I mean, it was a one shot too, which is, by the way, I appreciate the camera work there. Very, very nice. But like him walking through Winterfell, and he's kind of out of sorts and breathing hard. It puts the viewer immediately off kilter. It's very powerful and a very good way to start the episode off, and very meaningful.
And it bookends really nicely with, okay, so Sam is this kind of, he's not, doesn't have the cut of a warrior, he doesn't have a warrior's physique or whatever you want to say, and nor does he have a warrior's attitude, but it goes back to season 1, episode 1. You can't be brave if you're not afraid. And we get this portrayal of a guy who's a lot like us, and then we get the same portrayal of someone who's not at all like Sam, who's just as terrified and just as helpless. Sandor. That dude's a huge man. Like a minute ago, he was standing out in the front. He was shoving his way. I'm going to be in the front. But then he's faced with something that he's terrified of.
We cut as well, I have to say. When we don't cut, we have the one shot, and it transitions perfectly from Sam to Tyrion and how he's coping. He is going down to the crypts. He's grabbing some wine. He sees, Bran and Theon, and they're looking at them. This is a group of people that they have to be scared too. It's setting the stage of people in general who are afraid going into this battle.
Right on. Good point. From Danelle Peoples, R.I.P. House Mormont and all our theories. Yeah, House Mormont really took a beating in this one. 2 named characters from House Mormont go down, and the 2 of 2. So that's not the best for them. Maybe there's a Mormont cousin out there that can take over and keep it going, but I'm kind of not so sure they'll bother to cover that. But from Miskady, Night King Essence re-entered Werewoods. They had to meet at Winterfell Tree. Night King didn't try hard to get Bran before he crossed the wall. He sort of tried. Not, he went to the cave and killed the three-eyed raven and then sent his whites chasing after them after the hold the door moment. Maybe he could have tried a little harder. But the idea of his essence re-entering the Werewoods is kind of fits into the whole like Night King repops. Maybe not repops, but his soul or his being is still in there somewhere. Maybe it could manifest somehow or affect Green Seers going forward, like Bran. That would be some sort of way to maybe do an epilogue-y thing where Bran is still maybe influenced by the Night King from beyond. That would actually be, a sort of. It wouldn't be Bran equals Night King, but it would at least satisfy some of the foreshadowing that people are seeing when they use that theory. Which I don't agree that Bran is Night King, but if he had some sort of like Night King streak in him, that would at least satisfy people who have that theory, because it would at least be in that ballpark. Let's see. Let us move on to Arya's arc. We'll take the next set of questions a little later in the episode.
I should move these to the second set of questions, the questions that are here.
You've already got another batch?
I mean, I still have more in here that I didn't think you addressed.
I think I've answered all the ones in this first section.
Okay. This one just isn't pasting then. Here, see this?
Oh, the one you just added. Oh, yeah, okay. Trey Mackey, what if Qyburn already has made an army of the undead, and the whole time Bran and company were seeing the wrong undead army? Whoa. I don't think that works because we see the army, and we see them marching through the cold. They were definitely in the north. But it would be cool if... But I do expect Qyburn to have surprises. I kind of doubt there's a hidden undead army, but something, I do think he'll have some surprises. Any thoughts on maybe, do you guys have any thoughts on what he might do or any surprises he might have?
Something. I mean, he's clearly fascinated with this idea of, reanimated dead. They took a long camera shot of his face kind of, observing this, so wouldn't be surprised to see him be doing something unexpected. Maybe not a whole army.
Okay. And from Warlock Jelly 666, thank you, Warlock Jelly. We talked about thank you Satan earlier, or we can thank Satan again for that. Okay. Did Bran tell Arya when she needed to stab him? As in, I assume that means tell Bran when she needed to stab the Night King. And maybe I don't think so. I think that Arya was pushed towards her destiny by Melisandre there near the end, and she kind of grasped what was being said, and I don't think there was communication there, but there is a little, but the timing is awfully perfect. Like it's almost like Theon's needed to buy Bran 2 more minutes for Arya to get there, something like that. But I don't think it was a direct thing, but I'm not sure. Lady Gwen, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, not really.
Okay.
No. I think she knew.
She knew what she had to do.
And her, yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, let's talk about Arya more. She does it all. If we had more time, and in the future we may be able to do this, what we kind of wanted to do is just go through some of these characters' full arcs and kind of look at how Melisandre's words play out. Obviously, they didn't plan all this in super far in advance, but a lot of it's going to land even in retrospect. And I want to give D&D some credit that other people are not giving them, and I think it's kind of unfair that we're not giving them, because some people complain, and I don't think it's wrong to complain about this. I just take a different look at it. They say that Melisandre telling Arya in season 3 that she's going to close many eyes isn't foreshadowing for her killing Night King, because they hadn't decided who would kill Night King yet. That's fine. I disagree, but I won't tell you you're wrong. The reason I disagree is because this is what George does. George uses the Gardner style, leaves things open, gives himself options later. I think this is what they were doing. They're like, we're not sure who's going to kill Night King. For all we know, they had it narrowed down. And they had it down to Arya, Jon, and Dany.
They could have been aware, hey, Arya is going to kill some White Walkers. Like, they could have known that. Or, like, some whites. And they knew safely blue eyes is a safe assumption. And then they're like, hey, Night King does have blue eyes. like you said, gardening approach.
Yeah.
But while still the prophecy or whatnot would still have been true regardless of whether she killed Night King or not.
Yeah. So this doesn't alleviate them from like a lot of these other criticisms that they've fairly received, but I think going after them for doing Gardner style stuff kind of like George does is kind of unfair because, you know, it's pretty much the same technique here. Lady Glenn, what do you think about that?
Exactly the same. When I you know, that my exact thought when I saw that sort of criticism was what you said. George does this all the time, specifically, you know, in referring back to things from the earlier books. I mean, he definitely takes things that he might not have necessarily planned and uses them, incorporates them into his foreshadowing or into his character arcs. And I don't have a problem with it at all, as long as it makes sense. And that made sense.
Yeah, and I think to be fair, he's better at it than they are. But he's not perfect at it. There's a lot of false foreshadowing in book 1.
Yeah.
A lot.
My favorite,
you know, because he changed his mind on a lot of things.
Shadow like a king, look like a king, whatever.
Yeah, there's a lot of it. So it's fair's fair here, I think.
Yeah.
So if we're thinking through Arya's whole arc as a character from the beginning to end, that's hard to do because that's 8 seasons of Arya scenes, and we're not going to be able to remember everything. We couldn't possibly get all that together in 72 hours, but it's a fun thought exercise. We go back to, just thinking of how it plays out in this episode only. Obviously, her whole arc to become an assassin is obviously pretty damn crucial to her success here. But just within this episode, the back and forth, I think, is pretty cool with the subtext. First of all, she's on Archer on the walls, and she shoots a white that's like maybe about to grab Sandor. It may not have, it might be a stretch to say she saved him there, because that one white may not have killed him. But it was something. And then he later returns the favor, saving her. And they had both saved each other and fought for each other before this episode, as we know. So, she's probably not quite going to be so powerful in the book. She's really badass in the show, and I would guess she would be a little more limited in the books, but maybe not. Maybe she'll just be this ultra killer. We'll see. She definitely had the Simeon Staria eyes thing going there. Lady Gwen, let's get some thoughts from you on this. There's you've got some great notes here.
Yeah, I am not going to lie. When, as this played out in front of us on that giant screen, I stood up and yelled, "Dark Sister!" and I wasn't referring to the sword, although, I had thoughts about that later, book related, as I'm sure we all did. But in my mind, in that moment, she was just the Dark Sister. And I thought of this scene from A Storm of Swords where she sees the ghost of Highheart, who says to her, "I see you, wolf child, blood child. I thought it was the Lord who smelled of death. You're cruel to come to my hill, cruel. I gorged on grief at Summerhall. I need none of yours. Be gone from here, dark heart. Be gone." And I feel very strongly, as I did at the time, God knows years ago, that's the thematic origin of the things Melisandre said to Arya in the Riverlands that we were just talking about. It's, they didn't have the ghost of Highheart in the show, so they kind of, like they always do, they kind of merged some of those words into the words that Mel said to Arya. So, she's the dark heart, the dark sister. Whether that relates to the sword, maybe we talk about that later. We did have a question. I've seen a bunch of people commenting on this, and Lord Commander George the Golden asks about what the showrunners had revealed regarding their decision to have Arya kill the Night King. So we have the quote here. They said, "She seemed like the best candidate provided we weren't thinking of her in that moment. We hope to avoid the expected. Jon Snow has always been the hero, the one who's been the savior, but to us, it didn't seem right." So, question is, does this suggest a substantive change from the book arc? I mean, I watched their whole statement, not so extended beyond that quote, and for what it's worth, I kind of tend to believe it does, or it might anyways, suggest that they did their own thing there.
Yeah. I don't think it has to preclude that. And frankly, I don't really want to know for sure. I want to be guessing. If there's any room for, doubt in their statement, I want to choose to, see where that can lead me. So let's go down that rabbit hole. Though it's less likely, I think some creators sometimes are willing to lie to avoid spoilers. And the end of this series in particular is a situation where they might be willing to muddy the waters. That's less likely though. But another possible way that this statement isn't just a massive change to Arya's arc is, say, if they were told some bullet points, like Jon and Dany bring forces together to stop the Long Night. Amidst this, so-and-so, including Arya, fight others and definitely not ice spiders as big as hounds. Jon and or Dany die, and they're told other points among that, and they choose to adapt certain things. But they get a lot of the point of that across, in this episode, that they still hit that. It's like it would be a change in what roles the characters play, but it would still be an example of how they're all heroes. All of them were part of this group effort, which is like the theme that I want to get into that we'll get into going forward. But really, I'm also really curious, Jon and Dany didn't die in this, battle for the Dawn, right?
Yeah.
So I'm very curious. I mean, I assumed that they would in the books, that either one of them or both would.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there.
And so I'm curious if either one of Jon or Dany will survive until the end of the show. Because I could see them, if they decided to subvert expectations here, the tweak they made is not that Jon and Dany survive to the end, but is that they die in a different situation.
Okay. I could see that. What do you think, Lady Gwyn?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, because really what we've talked about a lot is the sort of bullet points. It's likely that is the information that they've had to go on, and they have to fill in the details. And, in that case, it wouldn't surprise me if they took liberties to tell their own story and, take this bullet point and that bullet point. And as long as they hit those notes, they're kind of free to fill in the details as they see fit. And I think it would be, a very fitting twist if Jon or Dany, I tend to think just one of them in particular will die before the end. And, so, we still get that sort of bullet point, but in a different way than we expected.
Right on. Okay.
Yeah.
A shout out to co-writer Joe Buckley, who adds a thought here. He doesn't think in the books there will be just this one really pivotal single last battle, which I kind of agree with. I could see there maybe being a big battle at like Harrenhal, like you said, Lady Gwyn. But I think he's generally right that either way, whether it comes down to one battle, there's going to be a lot of other things that happen before it. It's not just going to be straight to this, the show kind of just bolted straight to a final climactic battle without much before it. And of course, we've talked about how they just, maybe by necessity, they cut out a lot of the effects of winter, the starvation, the slow freezing of the north and the neck and whatever else is going to happen, the starvation, the disease, all that horror, all that fun stuff. So multiple fronts, multiple locations, because also, Joe, as Joe points out, it's a bit of an issue to have too many POVs in one place from a writing perspective. Like that can give some creates
a little bit of an issue, but he does it. I mean, he still does it. I mean, he did it at the beginning of Game of Thrones, and he's doing it in the beginning of The Winds of Winter going forward. Yeah,
you're right. At the beginning of Winterfell, there's a whole bunch of characters there. They split apart pretty fast,
and they come back together, and they split apart. So he doesn't necessarily have to whittle them down.
That's true. So another related idea here is, since we've talked a lot about, and we need to talk more about it later, Night King's deeds in the show having a lot to do with what we expect from Euron in the books, maybe even down to bringing, including things like bringing down the wall. There's some theories out there that I kind of like that need some more exploring that involve the Night King or Euron taking over the others, like controlling them somehow using the Horn of Winter or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, just not to get too into the weeds with this, but I mean, for one, there's theory that Sam in Old Town has the Horn of Winter. Okay? Part two of that is Euron coming to Old Town has reason to potentially get this horn. So that's part of the idea with that. And then you have all of the themes of Euron being associated with, Green Dreams potentially, and, Werewood Network and all of that, which they are associated with darkness and a little spooky. So you can get where people get into some theories about this. But what I want to go with this is, we've long talked about the idea that Arya could acquire Dark Sister, thus having Valyrian steel. With that, what she does with that, there's no Night King. So
Right.
my question is, do we think she'll use it to be killing others or someone else
Kill
similarly
Euron. Yeah.
important and epic like Euron? And there can be someone important and epic that is involved in bringing about the Long Night, but it could also just be someone important.
You could even see it going very similarly, like shockingly similar. If it's maybe a little tinfoil because we're building a theory on a theory, but if Euron controls the White Walker somehow, it's possible he just unleashes them and benefits from the chaos. But if he controls them somehow, killing him would mean they're no longer in his control, and then they're maybe less of a threat or less. I don't know.
Sure.
It's a lot of different possibilities there, but you could maybe squint and see Arya killing Euron and it having a similar sort of effect as kind of loosening his hold on these magical forces or something like that. We'll see. It's fun to think about. The high magic stuff's awfully hard to predict.
And the thing that gets to me as well is that there's also been a long theories about Euron and Bran and their differences between them, similarities in their tales, you know? And the idea of this being Night King and Bran, opposed with each other, and Arya being involved is very similar to like that, to Euron in this position. But you also think about theories about the wall, like the Night King. Two things that he has done are bring the wall down, and one, that's what we were theorizing that Euron could potentially do. So that's pretty.
And the dragon, the other big
and he's taken control of a dragon. Well, guess what? That's the other thing that people are theorizing that Euron could do with Dragonbinder.
Right, that's hardly even a theory. It's like he says he has a horn that can control dragons.
So whether he does them both, we don't know. But it gives what he says he can do a little bit more credence to me.
And it shows it backs up the theory of maybe he won't control the others, but if he wants to unleash them, well, he flies that dragon up there, takes down the wall, and I don't know. Prophet comes next somehow. Euron's version of Prophet, anyway. And it might be harder to kill Euron if he's a dragon rider, but hey, that didn't save Night King. You can't ride your dragon 100% of the time. Joe Buckley writes that he kind of likes the idea of all the Stark kids getting Valyrian steel. You could see maybe some of them, you can see how that might line up. Maybe Sansa won't. She doesn't really have the warrior arc going, but hey, maybe she could always just carry one around for decoration. Look cool.
I mean, she just needs to have someone protecting her that has one, for example. Having Brienne there with her or something could be effectively the same.
And Bran probably won't be wielding any swords either, but maybe indirectly he will.
Yeah, I mean, that's also where we get into, with Dark Sister and with who has Valyrian steel and who does this sort of thing and whether Arya does it or not. Some people theorize, again, that Jon gets Dark Sister or that Mira gets it or brings it around. And if you're looking at Dark Sister as a stand-in weapon that will be used to help stop the Long Night, then who wields it could be relevant. But a lot of this is wanting to leave all of our listeners, I think, with something to think about and ruminate on.
Yeah. So we touched on the Night King's touch and Arya, whether Arya was touched, probably not Arya, but it brings us to the concept of Craster and the which is a book show thing, and the touch of the others and the giving of children and how they turn into others. That's still very much unexplored and unknown, and there could be a lot more. Well, there should be a lot more detail in the books, but we wonder if this is how it works. Is there some? I don't know about a homing mark like what Night King did with Bran, but is it the same kind of thing where they have some sort of powerful touch that converts this baby into a White Walker? I don't know, but that's not out of line at all as a possibility. So moving back, that's a little bit off topic for Arya. Let's get back into rein things back in with Arya. Lady Gwyn, an important quote, a famous quote that we know from Game of Thrones that we love.
Yeah, Arya. She thinks many things after her initial training with Syrio. She has all these little, sound bites that are always in her head. The one that struck me most deeply in this episode is fear cuts deeper than swords, because we see her afraid. I mean, we don't see Arya afraid. Probably haven't seen her afraid in years and years and years. But here we see her really be afraid for the first time. But out of that fear, she still finds that place inside where she can be calm as still water, another one of her phrases. And she is silent as a mouse, which is another one that is in her arc during her time at Harrenhal. And then the best one of all, what do we say to the god of death?
Not today.
Not today. The Night King, he's literally the god of death, isn't he? So,
Pretty much.
it's just that whole series where we see so many of her sayings in action it was really compelling and I think very, very clear that they were playing out a lot of those different themes for her. And I want to say that I have so many Tolkien plots surrounding Arya. I mean, there's a huge one where she's got this Eowyn from Lord of the Rings killing the Witch King at Pelennor Fields, which, is a very compelling comparison. But, when we talk about the Night's King, we have to remember other things from Tolkien. The Witch King was killed, and incidentally, when he died, all of his magic died with him. But there was still a big bad. And so they still had to kill Sauron, who also, once they finally defeated him, all of his magic died. So it's a very similar vibe to the Night King. And also to point out, this occurred to me kind of a few minutes ago, that we saw in the Lord of the Rings, Sauron had been defeated before, and he came back. So, we were kind of puzzling over how the others were defeated before, and now they're back. This could be some sort of influence in George's mind where he's got some kind of high magic thoughts that we don't really understand yet.
True that. So Shay, you found something kind of funny, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Sorry, I meant to say. I wanted to say something to your point about Arya as well. Felt it was maybe, communicated. And we've been predicting this. We've thought this on our show for a long time about Arya killing the Night King. And that's with the Night King not being a character in the books, and with us not maybe entirely thinking about the implications of her doing something like that, right? Sorry, Aziz. And with that, I think it's very funny that Kit Harington himself, Jon Snow, said during the Game Revealed, the 40-minute special, he said he would have bet thousands that he killed Night King. He was confident that it would have been him. Whereas again, there just isn't a figure like that necessarily to kill for someone to be that savior figure. So like when you think about their quote saying like, to us, Jon Snow is always the hero, he was the savior. None of they're saying that they wanted there to be the hero or the savior, and they thought that would be Jon Snow, but they wanted to subvert that, whereas George is like, actually, none of them are really, like, the savior, Yeah,
this is
kind of what I get
at with it.
Simpler
version of that subversion.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, that's pretty funny. Even Kit thought he would kill Night King. I mean, it's not a bad bet for anyone. Yeah. So let's see here. And that's
probably
a great
bad bet for whoever's on the other side of that bet. They were like, I don't know if I should trust you. You're on this show in this role.
Yeah, we don't bet against Kit Harington about what's going to happen in Game of Thrones. So that's a great segue, what Ashay just said about, there not being one central, or there being many versions, and how smaller characters play really key roles. So let's talk about Sandor and Beric. This is a good example of Mel and Bran's talk. Remember, Mel and Bran both talk about this. Everything you did brought you to where you needed to be. That kind of same basic language of everything led you to this point. Very zen, So, Lady Gwen, what did this? How did this land for you?
This was, I thought they hit this note really very well several times throughout the episode. It's often tied with a redemption arc of sorts. I mean, it's Theon, it's Melisandre herself, it's even Jorah to some extent, and Sandor. They're all there kind of, playing out their heroic arc, if you will. And this sort of thought or idea that whatever you did in the past, here's where you were meant to be, really resonated throughout the episode 2 as well as this episode.
Right on. Yeah, they both saved each other several times, as we pointed out earlier, and before this episode. And it's really cool. And his panicking at the fire pit is obviously a callback to the Blackwater, right?
Yeah. But he snaps out of it to save Arya.
Yeah, there was no Arya at the Battle of the Blackwater for him to snap out of.
Nope.
And he's just a different person now. This is the transition that was really highlighted with a lot of characters in episodes 1 and 2, dancing with their ghosts and all that. And he fights for her, he said, and he fought for her again. It was the really most important thing.
Yeah.
But what about Sandor Sansa? You still holding out some hope for that?
Yeah, I'm still waiting. I honestly, I want to shout out our friend Mikhail Schick, who sent me a message the other day and said, I think Sandor belongs to Arya now. We were just kind of joking back and forth about that because I'm very disappointed that there has not been a Sandor Sansor. There hasn't been that moment, but I think it's very important to remember that his tale isn't done yet. One of the main reasons I think none of us thought he would die in this episode is because his arc isn't done. He's still got unfinished business with his brother. That's going to bring him back to King's Landing, back to the end of the show and whatever happens there. So I think there's still time. We have to, this is one of those things where we can talk about what the books versus the show. He's clearly tied very closely to both Arya and Sansa in the books, but the show didn't ignore his connection with Sansa in earlier seasons. So given the fact that even though sometimes they do seem to drop things, I think in a lot of these big pieces, they do tend to kind of, pull it together in the end. So I do think that there's going to be some kind of resolution, even if it's not the one we want to see, before he goes off on his unfinished business with his brother.
Right on. Beric is harder to figure, of course, because his relevance to the books at this point is a lot harder to figure, given that he's been dead for quite a while, and that there's no Stoneheart, and that Beric didn't end up passing his life force on to anyone in this episode, which was a common prediction. We liked it, but obviously didn't come to pass. But you know what? Maybe we shouldn't have made that prediction, because the way they did it in the show, it was always Thoros that summoned the magic. In the book, it was kind of like it was a little more ambiguous, because it did seem like that Beric asked Thoros to revive her instead. So even in the books, it sort of leans more towards Thoros being the catalyst. So maybe we never should have saw that. And once Thoros is dead, maybe that idea should have been off the table.
Right.
But he certainly played a huge role here.
Convincing
Jon that Night King was the key, the one who got Clegane back in the fight and pointing out, and then saved Arya's life himself. So I don't know. He's a lot like kind of how like Sandor and Brienne are sort of bookend characters in a lot of ways. They're more like knights than knights are in a lot of ways. They both protected the Stark daughters, and Melisandre and Beric are these kind of zealotrous figures that kind of never, maybe Melisandre wavered a little bit, but basically they never wavered. They had their confidence the whole time, and it was really important to the morale of the other characters. And this goes to what Ashea was saying, like all these characters playing their part. Morale is hugely important, and especially when, like, it's hard to underestimate just the pressure that these characters were under. We try to compare this battle to like real world battles, and it's like, well, when has any battle in the real world, the stakes are if one side loses, the world ends, that's never been a thing in the real world. So what kind of pressure does that put on the soldiers there? Morale's important. This is also very important for the books in terms of characters dying to fulfill their destinies. That's something that resonates in the books too. Like Jojen, right? Like that's a sad but true one that fits this concept to a T. He's out there saying it like, I'm not, I'm going to die soon, etc. He's not the one that needs to be afraid. So how do we think any of this relates to Lady Stoneheart or Book Melisandre? Maybe does the same thing where she, just decides she's done now and can turn into ash. Not this ash, but So what do you think about that, Lady? When you have any thoughts on?
Well, yeah, on Lady Stoneheart.
Just in general,
In general, any of this.
Barrack Stoneheart are characters fulfilling their destiny.
Yeah, I think that some of the things you said about Thoros, he was the mediator in the books and the show. So, with him not there, I think that was something that obviously probably couldn't happen. But in the books, it's noted that this isn't a state that's the state that Beric is in is not something that he's happy to be in. He passes on his gift of life to Lady Stoneheart, mainly because he's sick of being revived. He talks about that pretty compellingly. And given that we're still seeing these sort of elements of the Lady Stoneheart story playing out in the show, with Beric still being there, or being that last repository of Thoros's gift, whatever that was, and even Jaime's trial in the last episode, I think, is maybe inspired by what we might see in The Winds of Winter with Jaime's Lady Stoneheart trial. That it really gave me a lot of kind of meat to think about what extent Lady Stoneheart is going to have some role to play in Arya's arc.
Yeah.
Maybe not at that moment, maybe not that far into the story, but by being kind of in the right place at the right time, which is a big theme here. And it wouldn't surprise me if that thematically, those two came back together. So
one thing that relates really strongly to this that's important to mention, I think, is that we didn't get it in the show, and we really thought we would. I feel like it's a wasted opportunity. The characters being confronted with undead versions of themselves. We got it was like that Carsey thing was foreshadowing for it. It was a really common popular prediction. I'm really surprised it didn't happen, but Lady Stoneheart is a great example of how this could and will happen in the books, and how it could be way more impactful than just a white version of a dead person. Because Arya meeting her undead mother, blah, that's just like, damn, that's got some gravitas to it, because she has this weird relationship with death, and
well before even the whites.
Yeah, it should. Yeah, so she'll warm her up. She's
warm her up.
So that's it's hard to predict how such a scene would go, how George could write it. We can't, that's where George is going to really have to be at his best. Because, man, the human heart in conflict, meeting your undead mother, what do you do? I mean, how do you
conflict?
Yeah, how do you begin to write that? So let's tease a little bit here about the prophesied heroes that we're going to talk about in the bonus episode. As you can see, this episode we're really burning the candle in this episode, going why we don't have time to cover this in this episode, because we have a lot more to say.
It grew a little bit. We're thinking we're going to call the episode the Many-Faced Azor Ahai, which is a term that we use in our Great Empire of the Dawn episode, actually, for one of our section headers, which is pretty cool.
We forgot all about that.
Yeah, I went back and I was like, geez, we called this section this title, and has this great quote. So immediately I'm watching the episode, big group of people, and I'm emotional and all that, but immediately afterwards all I can think about is this one quote from The World of Ice and Fire, and we can skip the first section of it, but I'll start from here. From How Long. You want to read it, Aziz?
Sure. How long the darkness endured, no man can say. But all agreed that it was only when a great warrior, known variously as Herkun the Hero, Azor Ahai, Yentar, Nefarian, and Eldrick Shadow Chaser, arose to give courage to the race of men and lead the virtuous into battle with his blazing sword Lightbringer, that the darkness was put to rout and light and love returned once more to the world.
Okay, so hey, both Jon and Dany did in fact do this, especially if you look at Lightbringer as dragons, or the Night's Watch, or a million other thing, whatever your theory is about that. They definitely gave courage to the race of men and led them into battle.
Yeah.
Also, this is very similar to the idea of the stallion who mounts the world, uniting people, which is something else we're going to get really into in our bonus episode.
Yeah.
So then, this isn't the end of the quote, though. Go on, Aziz.
Yet the great empire of the dawn was not reborn. For the restored world was a broken place where every tribe of men went its own way, fearful of all the others, and war and lust and murder endured even to our present day.
And look, this quote addresses the idea that the ultimate big bad is humanity fighting itself. It isn't about Cersei or Euron or anything like that. It's that they're still fighting themselves. They've stopped the long night. They've kept darkness at bay. And they're still all just going to die. Even like we're like, oh, yay, Grey Worm's alive. He's still just going to die in these battles to come. The dragons are going to die, etc., etc.
Yeah. So the big takeaways from this teaser, these great quotes that get us deeper into the meaning of Azor Ahai and Prince That Was Promised, which wasn't delved into very deeply in the show. And a lot of us book readers kind of just substituted what we know about Azor Ahai and Princess Promised and Stallion of the Mountains of the World for the show because it didn't dive into that. It was kind of like whenever they touched on it, it was for us book readers because they talked about it so sparingly in the actual show. So it's kind of one of those things that was a consistent nod to book readers, even though it wasn't perfect. But I liked it because the way they resolve it here, it actually lines up pretty well. And as Ashaya said, we've got a lot more quotes that very distinctly point to Azor Ahai, Prince That Was Promised, Stallion Mounts of the World. All these figures are uniters. They're unifiers. They're bringing They're bringing together people who are warring to fight a common enemy.
To get more into it, like the idea that Azor Ahai or something like that, whatever, the prophecy can be a prophecy, yes, about a uniter, but that the various actual figures that we hear about, Hirkun the hero or Yintar, that those were actual people who were pivotal in stopping the long night.
Yeah. Or they were one person that each culture is either.
Which is also possible, but again, based on what we saw in this episode, I feel we're going to get into a really nice chat about all that.
Yeah, it's going to be great. So real quick, Lady Gwyn, do you have anything to add to that before we move on? Or because I know you guys have covered this topic a bit in the past as well.
Yeah, I mean, nothing specific to add. We have covered it, like you said. I want to say that I was very energized and interested in talking with Shea after the episode. we had long chats about it into the wee hours of the morning.
She was fired up. You were fired up.
Yeah, I'm picturing like there's like I'd go up to someone and they'd be like, blah, blah, blah. I can't believe Arya's Azor Ahai. They were kind of bummed or something. And like my eyes just light up and I'm like, have I told you the good word of Azor Ahai is the friends we made along the way? And I'm just running around.
After a while, it was just like, preach, girl. Just here's your chance.
I was telling Aziz I couldn't sleep. I was so excited about this idea. It's something I've thought about. The World of Ice and Fire came out 5 years ago or something like that. And it's this one quote. So all I could think about when I went to the quote and I saw that it actually addressed the next back half of this season of the 3 episodes about the wars continuing, I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. And like I said, there's some other great quotes that we'll have too about like the Roynar's version of events. And
there's just so many quotes that it's like the same. Well, anyway, we'll get to it.
We're gonna get there.
We're gushing.
Sorry, I know everyone is on the same page as me and is so excited for this episode. But there's a lot of other stuff to talk about.
Okay, let's take a quick mid-roll break here. Ashaya and I are both wearing a nice new pair of headphones here. Look I might have horses on them. Look at this. It's so cool.
Yeah, you do. Yours are, I wish I should pick yours up and show it.
I'm wearing the, here we go. Put it up with the camera there. This is the Studio Regent. Little horses on there.
How cute.
The Studio Regent is made by Studio Sweden, and it's a premium on-ear model. It says impeccable clarity in the instrumental tones. It's got a great sound. I really like it. This is the second version of this. They gave me a pair of these a year or two ago. It was Regent version 1. This is Regent version 2. I'm very happy with it. It really holds a lot of battery life. Bluetooth is really smooth. And you can take these little caps off. The speaker headphone caps are removable and interchangeable. It's really, really great pair of headphones. They've lasted a long time, and now I've got the second version. So you can get your own pair. Go to historyofwesteros.com. There's a link on the right. There's also a link in the show notes. Westeros 15 is a bonus code that gets you 15% off your purchase from Studio Sweden. And these are really, really great headphones, folks. So check them out. Also, thanks to some of our patrons. We have our Blood Riders to thank. I want to say thanks to Vorsaki, wielder of a Valyrian steel arak with a dragonbone hilt. Koel Koi, called Sunpiercer, is wielder of a dragonbone bow, and Kakava the Tamer, wielder of the Wildfire Whip Gehenna. And also a quick shout out to our sellsword captains, who I suppose will be having more to talk about sellsword-wise once the Golden Company gets into this mix. They're kind of hanging out there, waiting to be used. So thanks to Peter Blaze, the Emerald Isle, captain of the Werewood Wanderers, long lives, quick deaths, cold beer, and warm women. Daegron, Marshal of the Axe, captain of the Red Tide, resistance is futile. Kyron Callsbane, captain of the Stone Shields, the torrent breaks upon the stone. Haima Hillman, captain of the Whispering Children, dead men tell no secrets. Shepard, the shepherd of Essos, all men are sheep before the shepherd, heir to the Whispering Children. Lady Lajara Dajo, the Iron Lily, master archer. Castellan of the Summer Island Keep, Arboreal Point, captain of the all-female Wailing Widows, women and children first. Cody, the Crimson Bastard of Bracken, captain of the Red Waste Exiles and recruiter of the Free Folk. Cameron, the Hammer of Hornwood, captain of the English Lions with the motto, honor is the reward of virtue. Lord Brandon Brewer of Castle Blackrune, captain of the Shadow Wolves, our steel is cold, our vengeance colder. And Black Alex Sand, the Bastard of Spears, is leader of the Bermuda Vanguard. Heck yeah, thanks y'all. Let's say a couple of quick things about Ice and FireCon real quick. We got our shirts on. We should throw out a quick mention. Quick shout out to our History of Westeros Facebook mods who banded together to make a Sigils panel. It was really cool. I was wearing the Sigil shirt on Monday, one of the many Sigil shirts. So that's Laura.
Which had art by Ed Shear.
Art by Ed Shear, lest yes, I would be very remiss in not mentioning that. Ed Shear has done some of our dragon art and lots of other great art around the fandom. So shout outs to our History of Westeros mods that were on that panel. That's Laura, Rebecca, Thomas, and Scott. It was great to see you all at the con as well. Super fun. Say something about the musical, guys. How good was that?
I loved the musical. Definitely very moving, very funny. It's I mean, already, when knowing the series so well, knowing how Game of Thrones has adapted it, gives you another level of appreciation. But then also being friends at the convention with people who are in it is another level. So I don't know. There was a lot of ways that I was enjoying the musical this year.
Right on.
Yeah,
me too. And you too, Lady Gwen?
Yeah, oh, definitely. I mean, to Brian and Tara and Dom and everyone involved, so many people, and the fact that they put that together remotely for the most part, and really only had that, got people together at the con, physically speaking, and pulled off this absolutely amazing bit of entertainment for us.
And to people in the chat asking, they're very likely that they have uploaded it in previous years and they'll upload it this year.
Yeah, so that we will, once we get a link, once we have the ability to share it around, we will definitely do that.
And I can also tell you to go, Radio Westeros has an Instagram now, which we sort of have had for a while, but we activated just for the convention so that we could share lots of pictures. And we had very good seats for the musical, so I was able to upload a lot of pictures of the musical and other fun moments from the convention. So
meanwhile, I'm slacking. We've had just so much to do here since we got home, and honestly, all I could do is work on this Prophecy Heroes stuff, which we ended up pushing mostly out of this episode. But I will have lots of pictures and videos for all of you as well. So look out on I'll share it to the History of Westeros Facebook group.
And you were, perhaps you deserve a title for your performance at the con. Maybe we should call you Asharia. Asharia?
I will say two things. Okay, I was really cheering for there to be more deaths in this episode, and I was really cheering for the idea of a faceless woman winning it all there and killing it, because I won the faceless man game there at the
convention. Yeah, it's a game basically where you get there's a dossier, everyone who's playing, you get to run around and potentially you get to stab other people with a spoon. And it's just a kind of an ongoing game around I didn't play. Sean played as well, but Shea had gotten pretty far in the past, but this time all the way.
And I had the highest kill count. That's
right.
And
so Shea's
I
a killer.
also cosplayed this year as Eleanor Costain, the Black Bride, who was the last one standing out of that. So really just a lot of death in my weekend.
So you're like,
my weekend.
Why are we trying to invite y'all to a convention where there's all this death? Well, Anyway.
And next year I'm planning on being Jon Kildark, the Scarlet Shadow, all the armor, especially with all my killing, so people will really have to watch out.
Right on. So if we're hitting you really hard with FOMO right now, you have another chance. Come see us at Con of Thrones. That's in July. So after the season, we get to talk about a completed Game of Thrones. You can hang out with us, maybe have a drink with us, whatever you want.
And
attend panels.
And if you happen to be on the European side of things, we are going to be at Worldcon and or more likely TitanCon.
Yeah, probably Worldcon, maybe TitanCon.
Yeah.
And
that's in Ireland.
That's right. Also, so for Con of Thrones, you can use the discount code HISTORY to get $5 off your ticket purchase. Okay, let's take another set of questions here. We got a bunch more questions built up, a lot of really good questions, maybe a few that we've covered already, but just good stuff. Let's get to it. Uptown GBV, another person we got to meet for the first time from Twitteros at the con. That was great. Good to see you, buddy. In season 7, Melisandre tells Varys, I have to die in this strange country just like you. I think Mel's death revealed something to show watchers that book readers gleaned from her point of view. Her motivations were pure, even if her methods were distasteful. That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, we didn't know. Everybody thought Melisandre was maybe full of it till we got her chapter, and we're like, nope. She truly believes what she's saying. His question continues here. Assuming Varys dies this season, do you think the circumstances surrounding his death will reveal something about his motivations for playing the Game of Thrones that book readers know, or at least suspect, maybe that he's of Targaryen descent, something to make, to complete the change away from the Fagon plot? Yeah, I guess we could see something like that. Maybe a Varys connection to that, but I don't know. I feel like they're just gonna not do much with his backstory, but that's a really good idea. Any thoughts on that, Lady Gwyn?
I hadn't really thought about them revealing anything about Varys.
Yeah, it's because it's not going to happen.
I think this is one of those moments when we're hoping for some kind of subtlety that's not going to happen, sadly. But I do have something to say about Melisandre since you brought it up. And hey, so awesome to meet you at the con. But you have basically kind of preface something that I was going to say later, and I'm just going to paste it right here and just kind of paraphrase it right now. So,
cool.
About Melisandre, because you're right, that moment at the end when she walks out into the dawn and kind of gives up her glamour and turns to dust right before our eyes, we literally see her last breath. Was this powerful visual of fire dying in the cold. And I thought, a moment of redemption. At least it was made palpably clear that she had been a slave to her cause that she believed in with all of her being for years beyond count, to take that her own words from the book. And all she had ever done was done in the service of this cause. So we can still have the Mel versus Davos philosophical debate about sacrifice and, what is valid in those situations. Mm-hmm. But I think her particular point of view in this moment does seem somewhat validated, notwithstanding her mistakes of interpretation. Mm-hmm. And like Tim said, the distasteful methods that she used, it still seemed to be, this is definitely one of those things that George wants us to think about. So yeah, I think it was well handled by the show.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm one of the people. I'm a recent convert. I'm one of the people who
I haven't. R'hllor?
Yeah, to R'hllor, to Melisandre specifically. Even having read the books, sure, she can feel that she's doing the right thing and be in complete service and dedication to it. But if she's wrong completely, then who cares that she's, she's doing distasteful things, like we said, reprehensible things. But if she's doing it and getting and misinterpreting things wrong, then it's even worse. Whereas here, if we see that she did all of these things and she was right, she did need to do certain things this way, then, well, I guess I accept it that she did that. People got on my case about things that she did. I mentioned this on Monday's stream, and excusing her burning Shireen in the show, for example, or other things that she's done. And there's a lot of characters who've done reprehensible things who didn't have this sort of single-minded goal that humanity needs to be saved, which is a pretty noble goal, really. So I've turned around on Melisandre completely.
Right on. Okay, moving on. Question from Sylvia Sabrex. Jon, Bran, and Arya need to kill Arya. I think that might be a mistype because it says Jon, Bran, and Arya need to kill Arya. But let's see if we can parse this. New Three-Eyed Raven and new Night King. Still an Azor type there. Cersei is the plot point driving us away from a third twist. I can maybe see that, Cersei being a distraction to maybe some other thing that's still happening that's important, maybe something beyond Jon and Dany's parentage issues and succession issues. But I am going to advise everybody not to set their expectations for big twists like this. I think it's definitely possible, but I don't have expectations for that. I think just like we predicted Night King would go down before Cersei, the simplest answers are usually going to be right here. And if you set your expectations low and we hit a twist, well, the twist just lands more because you just weren't expecting it. Super chat from John Wiley, no question. Well, thank you, John. From Fred Targaryen's Uncle Daddy again. Do you think Arya may use Oathkeeper after it goes through Lady Stoneheart's heart? Daddy's steel? Sort of Lightbringer being forged in a way. Interesting.
Yeah, I think I'm still more dead set on the idea that Azor. People are too hung up on this idea of Azor Ahai, and we have to see Lightbringer be forged. I don't think it is that.
Well, it could be. I don't think he's saying that it would be the one moment. It would be just one of the many, checking off one of those many boxes that relates to the. But
I'm still saying I think too many people are hung up. I think in general, with this context.
Okay.
I think that. The heart, it's the heart of the story that matters. It's the heart of it, which is it's a tale of uniting people.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of the other parts of it are extraneous and are things that just were added on to this myth that aren't actually essential.
Okay.
It's my take.
Stoneheart would probably be, to maybe make this fit, if we're trying to be generous, Stoneheart would be an obstacle towards unity.
Yeah,
she is basically a revenant, and that's not that might be why she needs to die to make things work. Maybe and that would certainly cause a lot of conflict if Arya realized she had to do it or something like that. I hope not. I don't really know that I want to see Arya faced with that. But if George does it, I'm sure it'll be awesome. From Zlata Waters. They got the library rebuilt pretty well, seeing as it's been burnt possibly twice, and I don't think the Boltons care much about libraries. It's a good point. The library was pretty nicely rebuilt there for Arya to run around in. Someone dropped a great comment. We hoped that if you look really close in the bookshelves, you might see a copy of A Caution for Young Girls.
I saw that.
Great comment, yeah. From Acre Frey. If two witches watch two watches, which watch would watch which watch? Each witch would watch which watch belonged to which witch's wrist. Much love. I'm not going to make anyone else say that. But that came from our tongue twister man. Thank you, Acre Frey, Lord of the Chicken Dance.
Tongue twister man.
From Herb Thompson. Might be too late, but do any of you three actually think Arya's going to be the one to kill the leader of the others? Yeah, well, we talked about that a little bit. As if Euron leads the others, then she could kill him, but I don't think there is a boss other. I think we're all pretty much in agreement on that, although there's always a chance that is revealed later.
The idea of a boss other, a great other, I'm with you there, but the idea of a figure that will bring about more of the long night or have a controlling, status, or someone who needs to be defeated, the jury's out for me, and I feel more like it's possible based on the show.
Cool. All right. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I'm definitely not married to that side. I can see your point there. So JDS Third says, why the rumors George R. Martin is waiting to release books until after the show are done? The publisher and J.R.R. have said this is not true. Your thoughts? Yeah, I really don't like that theory. Not that it's bad that someone believes it, but it just does not make sense. George loses so much money by waiting. Seriously, think about this. How big is the show right now? We, this week, have broken records for live stream viewers. This would be a good week to release the book, Capture That Magic, during the season. Why wait till it's over, till the things start to fritter off a little bit? It doesn't make sense. He makes more money by releasing it sooner. It doesn't help him to make money to wait. That's just not true. I don't know how else to say it. So thank you for asking, because I like the opportunity to reject that theory very openly. And I guess you guys would probably agree with that.
Yeah, I think there's 0% chance that this would ever happen.
Cool, good. Yeah. All right, so hopefully put your mind at ease there. George isn't messing with us like that. Although I guess that would be kind of neat to find out that he was actually done. But
yeah, it would be neat. His publishers, furthermore, would never.
They're like, give us that money now.
Exactly. They would not be sitting on a completed book and waiting for any reason.
Yeah, they wouldn't. They wouldn't, like, HBO couldn't make them not do that. To be like, HBO's like, we're going to pay you $10 million to hold back that book. Yeah, I don't think so. And why would they do that?
Right.
What's HBO's motivation there? I don't even think I think that's kind of sketchy. Anyway, let's move on. Christina Dillsdale says appreciation super chat. Well, thank you, Christina. Carrie Neves, thank you for your refreshing positivity. Thank you for that as well. L. Hamilton, super chat without a question. Thank you, L. Hamilton. Tina Carney, does the Night King re-raise the dead that are already killed by Dragonglass, Valyrian Steel when he raised the dead mid-battle? Is this ever covered? It seems like no, that he can't re-raise them, but I'm not 100% clear on that. It's definitely not explained completely.
I would point out that he didn't re-raise the one obvious one that would have settled that point once and for all, the giant.
That is true, yes. Yeah. Although the giant did kind of fall apart, but still it could have risen, in part. So, yeah. That's part of why, some people theorize that the fire is even better, because you definitely aren't resurrecting them if they get burned. Mm-hmm. From Maura Lee, just a show of appreciation and love to you both for the excellent content. Thank you very much, Maura. I hope you saw earlier the cats were on screen, or one of them was.
Yeah, Xerxes.
From Rebecca Santa, I'm with you. Azor Ahai being many people. The main tale, we're told, is that of a really talented blacksmith. Who's to say the forget and wielder the forger, sorry, yes. The forger and wielder of Lightbringer are the same. Yeah, why would they necessarily be the same? Yeah. Good question, or good point. Okay, moving on. We perhaps failed to discuss the biggest prophesied hero of them all, Dolorous Ed. Can we all have a now his watch is ended for our man, Dolorous Ed?
Yes.
And now
his watch is ended.
Thank you. Yes. It's so hard to predict show Ed versus book Ed, because the Night's Watch has been compressed into very few figures when there's really a lot of different characters in the Night's Watch, even though it's not exactly a large organization in the books. But there's a lot of named characters that just don't exist in the show. So it's kind of hard to imagine book Ed having a similar arc because of all that compression. But then again, he's on the wall. It's not a very safe place to be. It's kind of hard. You could kind of imagine him having a somewhat similar end. And us, a couple years from now, maybe having the same moment of giving him a toast. Anything to say about Ed, either of y'all?
Ed's dead.
Ed's dead, baby.
Ed is dead. But he's a hero.
He is a hero. Right on.
He saved Sam.
No, what I have to say about Ed has to do with Sam specifically. It has to do with really what I want going forward out of this show, which is to see these characters face this trauma, to process their trauma, to deal with it. We didn't see as much of it as we thought we would with them being faced with the white version of themselves. But Sam saw someone he was close friends with, someone that he was friends with, period. He saw him get killed in a horrific way after he had already been in a situation that would just give anyone PTSD. I really need time to see Sam and others process the complete horror that they saw.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. I also hope we get a little bit of a chance to see these characters on some level making all those sacrifices matter, Sam, sort of taking, Ed saved his life, and, let's make that matter. So Sam, does amazing things.
Yeah. Let's talk about Winterfell a bit. It's easy to get the wrong idea about Book Winterfell from looking at show Winterfell. They're very different. Book Winterfell is way larger. The Godswood alone is 3 acres. It would be a lot easier for Arya to get hidden in that, or for, Alice Karstark to go find a place to hide. But
yeah.
But even with Winterfell being vastly smaller, it still wouldn't be, or Book Winterfell still wouldn't be big enough to fit that huge army in it. So they would still have to do some weird stuff if there were some sort of big showdown there, which there, in the show, book version is probably going to be different. It's probably Stannis leading, a northern coalition against the first real onslaught of the others that we see in the books. But there's other options. And there's 2 walls. That's another huge factor. Book Winterfell has 2 walls. Yeah. So there would be a lot more time to just it would be a lot more drawn out and a lot more slow building as far as the dead maybe getting over the walls, like making a bridge of their own bodies, things like that.
and the moat is between the two walls.
Yeah.
So you could see that sort of fire barrier being, a ring of fire in between the two walls, which would be incredibly epic.
That would be awesome. Now I want this, now that I've heard it. So I was trying to think of analogies for what the Army of the Dead is like, because there's a lot of people weighing in on the battle strategy. We're not going to get into that. We did that on Monday, and it's not really it's certainly not the most interesting topic, I think.
Not to me.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But there are some takeaways for sure. And one thing I thought of as an analogy, that the Army of the Dead you can't really think about them like you think about human armies. They don't function like that. They don't have fear. They don't have, they have a unity of purpose, but they don't have any individuality. The watching them like use their bodies as a bridge over the fire, that's totally ant behavior. That's how ants like handle like drowning and crossing dangerous rivers. Some of them sacrifice themselves. And they have like a queen that leads them, It's kind of like fits. The analogy works pretty well. Mm-hmm. And I thought of this, and then I later realized that this is a huge book parallel, the concept of seeing the dead as ants, and how the George is like all over this parallel. I almost like realized like, hey, I probably was just remembering this subconsciously rather than maybe this wasn't a new idea after all, because this is already in the books. Lady Gwen, you want to read this really cool quote from Daenerys' last A Dance with Dragons chapter?
Yeah, this is really good. I mean, just substitute dead for ants while you're listening.
Yeah.
Remember who you are, Daenerys, the stars whispered in a woman's voice. The dragons know. Do you? The next morning, she woke stiff and sore and aching, the ants crawling on her arms and legs and face. When she realized what they were, she kicked aside the stalks of dry brown grass that had served as her bed and blanket and struggled to her feet. She had bites all over her, little red bumps, itchy and inflamed. Where did all the ants come from? Dany brushed them from her arms and legs and belly. She ran a hand across her stubbly scalp where her hair had burned away and felt more ants on her head and one crawling down the back of her neck. She knocked them off and crushed them under her bare feet. There were so many, it turned out that their anthill was on the other side of her wall. She wondered how the ants had managed to climb over it and find her. To them, these tumble-down stones must loom as huge as the wall of Westeros. The biggest wall in all the world, her brother Viserys used to say, as proud as if he'd built it himself.
I love that last line, as proud as if he'd built it himself. So George isn't trying to be subtle here. He just flat out says, like the wall of Westeros. He shows it, and you're like, oh, look at that parallel. And so that's awesome. That's a really fantastic parallel. Shout out to Ravenous Reader, who, when I made the tweet about the army that did like ants, was just like, boom. Ants, and had this quote ready, so it was like, bam. Dany also thinks of people as ants when she's high on her dragon at another point. So the ant analogy comes back, and Jon also does the same when he's atop the wall. He looks down and sees the wildlings and rangers in the distance, well, just rangers in this case, and thinks of them as ants. And then he reminds himself those are people. It's really kind of poignant. He's like, because even though no matter what they look like, he's still like, no, those are individual. Those are my brothers. Those are rangers, etc. So it's really neat. It's that's a great parallel. So it's very cool to think about for the books, and the concept of how the dead are going to move throughout this world once they get beyond the wall. And Dany's asking all these questions about, there's so many, and how did they get here? And we're wondering that too. How are they going to get over the wall? How are they going to get around it? So she's really channeling the reader's questions there. Let's talk about dragon battles, unless y'all had more to say about that. So I'm a believer, you guys probably are too, maybe, that we'll have some sort of dragon versus dragon fight in the books, maybe very similar to what we saw with Viserion being controlled by Euron or an undead thing and fighting that. Another hat tip to Ravenous Reader, who points out the Night King's Stormfront, which appears to have been timed to stop Drogon and Rhaegal as they were flying out. It was kind of like hit them with a blast of wind, icy wind. It's really similar. It's a great callback to the Rhoynar using their water spouts and their haze and their clouds of vapor to fight the dragons of Valyria. And a cloud of haze or vapor could be pretty effective in disorienting a dragon rider or three. And you could obscure ground targets, make it harder for the dragons to do strafing runs on infantry and things like that. So, hey, that could come up. We could see something like that. Not the Rhoynar magic, but more White Walker magic that's maybe similar to that.
Yeah. Regarding that mist, there's definitely a precedent that's introduced in A Dance of Dragons. Tormund is explaining to Jon about the death of his son Torwyn, and he says to him, "A man can fight the dead, but when their masters come, when the white mists rise up, how do you fight a mist, Crow? Shadows with teeth, air so cold it hurts to breathe, like a knife inside your chest. You do not know. You cannot know. Can your sword cut cold?"
Really good. That was a great grab there, Lady Gwen. That quote is so perfect for what we were saying there. And for more, a little more, if that piques your interest, we have our Nymeria / Rhoynar episodes that gets more into that water magic stuff, and of course, a lot of Radio Westeros podcasts worth listening to on some of these topics as well. Do you have one that maybe have you talked about Tormund much on your show?
I would guess if we did, it would have been in our Jon Snow episode.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe the Jon Snow episode is probably the place to go then.
Our Jon Snow episode is titled "Only the Cold," so we can talk about that subject.
Okay. We didn't get any ice spiders as big as hounds or any size, really. There were no ice spiders at all. And I imagine in the books we will get all that and all kinds of undead animals. The Army of the Dead in the show is not is a little more homogenous than we'll get in the books, which that's not a complaint. It just adds a lot of money to their bottom line, I think. So we can't. That's one of those kind of things that we really. I think that goes beyond nitpicking, but that's just me. I'm not saying you're wrong if you hold a different opinion, but I do think we'll get like birds and animals and wolves and dead bears and all that. The Army of the Dead is not going to be just people, and that's going to make it even more terrifying and weird.
Definitely. It costs very little for George to type a sentence describing ice spiders or undead, whatever, and terrify us. Where that's very different from making it come alive on screen. So.
And what we did get, one cool shot we got, is really hard to see. I encourage y'all to go back and watch the episode. Look around the time when the Whites are just standing there without a way to get through the fire pit. Night King hasn't given them their bridge orders yet. It's a little odd that no one's shooting arrows at the dead while they're just standing there, but we do have Dany keeping her focus in the background. She's just blasting the dead back and forth, just strafing them all back and forth. It's very cool. At one point, she takes out a giant. It's really cool. There's a big ass giant in the back, and she just torches it completely. And it's like, ooh, look at that! Cool moment there. I think it's. I wish we could get a shot of it. We just didn't have time to find it because it's a really kind of obscure moment. So hopefully we get stuff like that. Let's talk about Lyanna Mormont for just a second. Speaking of giants, she had a pretty epic death. A lot like Donald Noy. Donald Noy in the books dies he dies because he fights the giant in the Mag the Mighty in the tunnel. Kind of like it's basically Gren's death in the show there. So that was a nice little hat tip to the books there. And you had your own little take on that too.
Yeah, I mean, really, a real world sort of allusion is David and Goliath. This idea of the smallest warrior fighting the biggest warrior. And I think you said that Bella mentioned David and Goliath, which I had not heard.
Oh, that's cool. Right on. Yeah. I guess, Shea had to go off for a second, so we can clarify with her later, but she's the one who looked that up. But Bella Ramsey's made that comment.
She's a very smart little girl.
Cool. Yeah. And apparently what got her a role. Remember, behind the episode, they're talking about she was supposed to be a one scene character, and then they said, but then we met Bella Ramsey. So apparently she's a very formidable person. She's making these comments and, kind of winning her way into a much larger role just through force of personality. Pretty cool.
Good for her.
That giant that she killed was referred to as Crumb in the subtitles for whatever that means. I don't know if that's a reference to something. Let's talk about Dany and Jorah. Start us off here, Lady Gwen.
Just one tiny little observation. If you rewatch his defense of Dany, you do see him. This comes post Night King raising, their own dead. So you do see him kill an Arak wielding zombie. So obviously one of their own. Blink if you miss it kind of moment. But even though she reminded him in the previous episode that he'd been forgiven for a long time, a long time ago, this was really Jorah's ultimate redemption. I mean, as much as he's had forgiveness for her, he hasn't really had much chance to prove it. And boy, he really proved it. I mean, he really proved himself here. He died protecting her. And quite frankly, one of my very favorite moments, very emotional moment with Jorah dying there in Dany's arms, but Drogon coming down and giving, Dany holding Jorah in her arms, this dragon hug. And then as the camera just pans out, that scene just really killed me.
That was good.
I can't say enough. Yeah.
That was quality for sure. And it's a nice reminder that the dragons have a sense of Dany's emotions. It's nothing like the skin changer bond, but it's something. It's very powerful.
A connection. You could see him coming up behind her as she was, it's amazing.
There's a couple people out there that said this episode did not have any emotional moments, and I'm just like, what are you talking about? Like, we are not watching the same show.
It was because it's so shocking just on that point, because there's so much going on. It's so fast and there's so many kind of, it's so violent that it wasn't as quietly emotive as episode 2, but there were still plenty of small moments that brought me to tears. I mean, I know I had my big bag of mom tissues when I was watching, handing them out to people sitting next to me while we were watching. Yeah.
Now, Jorah dying for Dany in the show, is very fitting for the show, and it could be how it goes in the books. He's on a similar path, trying to win redemption back from her, trying to get back in her good graces. And I don't doubt that it will happen. I mean, I wouldn't be super surprised if it didn't, but I would be surprised if it didn't. Not super surprised, but I really expect it to happen. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And I doubt he gets grayscale or Heart's Bane or leading, and I doubt he's leading Dothraki. I think the Dothraki will lead the Dothraki in the books, but a lot of these details will be different. But I think as a completed character arc, it feels pretty book authentic as far as how he'll finish off, like maybe dying defending Dany. Maybe it would be fitting. But we'll see what George does. Let's talk about. I quote a line that Joe Buckley wrote here. He says, "I'm a bit in love with Season 8 Jorah. Tried to mend all his mistakes, not just Dany-centric ones. Shall we try and make a connection and say Daenerys was always his heart's bane? No, let's not." Yes, Joe says all that. So, good take by Joe there. And Joe is going to be having his first appearance live on our show next week. Wednesday, we'll have him as a guest. Beside you there, lady. Well, not literally beside you, but in the bottom virtual box in the corner.
Yes, side by side in our. Good. I'll look forward to that.
Yeah. Well, we needed to bring in someone with a British accent since the Oak Boy's not around. So
yeah.
Let's talk about dragons versus whites. We saw Night King be immune to dragon fire, but my gut and the little bit of available evidence we has says White Walkers will melt to Dragonfire. You guys, I'd like to see you chatters weigh in on that too. What do you guys think?
I mean, I do. I think I'm not sure if it was inside the episode where they talked about the sort of uncertainty of whether Dragonfire or not having any evidence that Dragonfire was any different from regular fire.
Yeah.
I know I saw that somewhere, but I think it is different. I think it's clearly different. It's more akin to wildfire, and I would certainly expect wildfire to be effective. So against just about anything. So I think that dragons, Bran makes a point of saying, and this is also show, but he makes a point of saying that no one has ever tried dragons against the White Walkers, and that is true in the books. So we can't really say for sure, but I think dragons will be pretty effective.
Yeah, I agree. And same with the whites. The books, we should expect Dragonfire to be just as effective against the whites like it is in the show. I don't think there's any reason to doubt that. Seems pretty basic, pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about the Unsullied. I thought they were one of the cooler things about the show. I think some people disagreed, but it was cool watching them do their formations and watching them move in their patterns and their drill. They're ultra disciplined. Nice. Complete opposite of the Dothraki with their wild charge. Kind of, it's in the long term, you would guess that maybe in the books Daenerys is elite cavalry unit will learn to fight as a unit with her elite infantry, but that there wasn't time for that in the show. And I don't mean they didn't have time to show that. I mean, literally, the show's timeline didn't give them a chance to learn that. So I think that's kind of realistic that they didn't fight as a unit. They just didn't have time for it. Now, you noticed something cool relating to this really fun moment where they do the little spear cage with Melisandre in it and leading her up to the fire pit. That was awesome. Not just because Melisandre's Carice's acting was so good in that moment, but because it was just a neat kind of tactic for a battle, a little sub moment there. And you can see it in the books. You know, there's going to be there's a lot of reason to think there's going to be R'hllor priests on Dany's side, more than one probably, and you could see something like this happening. Not specifically like it, but you know, priests, sorcerers as part of an army. You know, that kind of thing. Very high magic, but we could be heading that way. So you noticed this vibe from the books that relates to this.
Yeah, I mean, as they're guarding the retreat and then guarding this foray out to light the fire, I got a real Qohor vibe, which is the 3,000 of Qohor. If you don't know the story, it's a fabled, battle between the 3,000 Unsullied that were purchased to guard the city of Qohor against a Dothraki onslaught, and they stood against it was more than 12,000 because I don't know exactly how many Dothraki survived, but 12,000 were dead compared to fewer than 2,500 of the Unsullied. Just in terms of their bravery and, sort of like with their proximity to Dothraki and their different fighting styles, I was just strongly reminded of their dedication to duty and their bravery against the odds there at Qohor. And even as I was watching it, I was thinking the words that Grey Worm spoke to Melisandre, Valar Dohaeris. All men must serve. Yeah.
And that moment, right? When he just has to make that tough call.
Yeah. He knows that that his men who are outside the trench, they're going to light the trench on fire, but he still has soldiers that are on the other side of it. And he makes the call, and you see his face, and he does it because he knows, like so many people through this episode, and we talked about this a little bit up so far, but we've more examples, I think, coming up that have to make these hard decisions and make sacrifices for the greater good. So it's an ongoing theme and interesting one to consider. Very
well said. So we're talking about Grey Worm. Welcome back, Ashay. We're talking about Grey Worm and Melisandre. You had some great thoughts here.
Yeah, I really liked the moment that Melisandre and Grey Worm shared there. That was very meaningful, where she says, all men must die, and he replies with, all men must serve. That's exactly what both of them are doing here. Of course, Melisandre ends up being the one to die, and Grey Worm continues to serve, but Melisandre's entire life has been in service, as has Grey Worm's.
Yeah.
And I think Grey Worm will die still. I still think he's doomed.
That's not, I can't really doubt you on that. I hope you're wrong, but I can't really
honestly
argue.
I feel like Raleigh Ritchie, Grey Worm, Jacob Anderson, whatever you want to call him, he's got so many names. The man with many names. Had another great moment when the Dothraki have had their fires extinguished, and everyone in the crowd is realizing this. There are tears in the actor's eyes as he waits for the return of the men who charged, and really chokes me up just thinking about the emotion that Grey Worm, despite being this warrior, that he does cry,
Yeah, it's really neat. Yeah. And it's not from fear, because we hear earlier that he's particularly fearless.
Yeah, I don't think it's that he's afraid. I think that it's a sad thing that he witnessed.
Yeah, he's just concerned with doing his duty and protecting people and all that. Yeah. Now, you noticed a really funny bit about Christopher Hivju Tormund from the behind the episode. It's so funny.
Yeah. Christopher said, and this is why I didn't want to, and also this right here is why I didn't want to be in this episode or talk about this subject, and why I got up. He said, Christopher, who plays Tormund, said, he told the extras, if you manage to take me down, take me down. So in some takes, Tormund does die. Which makes me wonder a little bit, like, if they were like, well, yeah, in some takes he dies, but we were never going to use that take. Or if there's possible for...
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah, I wonder if they just kind of Gardner-styled Tormund's life there. Probably not. But...
Yeah, whatever works.
Okay, so let's keep going. We've got some more questions to handle, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the crypts. And Danny and John, we already talked about Melisandre. So we're moving on here. Charlie Eggert. I'm a long-time listener, but first time sending in a question. Do you think, given the difference in book versus show around the Night King, that they may only have temporarily set back the White Walkers? Perhaps in order to put them down forever, Jon in his role as the prince that was promised still has to go north and destroy the werewood at the location of the Night King's birth. This might explain why in the show Arya defeated them at Winterfell. So that is not unlikely. I don't think that, since there's no boss other in the books probably, the destruction of their birthplace might be important. They may have like a base or a home in the lands of always winter. The heart of winter is a concept that's been tossed around and mentioned. What do you think, Lady Gwen?
I mean, I think it's something that bears thinking about, although I tend to think it's going to be more about the whole movement coming south. But, we can't forget that characters have dragons, and even if the main action is moving south, some characters could still move north if there's some magical thing that has to be destroyed up there. I can't hear you, Aziz.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was muted.
I didn't know if it was me.
Yeah. And that does make a lot of sense. Even though they did talk about it in the show, they showed the Night King's birth and made it somewhat important. They didn't really hint at it as the source of his power, but I could see very much it mattering in the book. So we'll have to wait and see. Anthony Gonzalez wants to know, why was it a good idea for both Lyanna and Arya to be held in the air by a monster only to kill it in the last second in the same episode? Honestly, I didn't even notice that. And when no one mentioned that on Monday either. So that's an interesting point.
I thought it was meant to be a parallel between the two of them. So it felt like Arya, they killed Lyanna, so Arya's doomed too.
So they could, okay, yeah. Because there was that moment we were all like at Ice and Fire Con, the whole room was like, yeah, no, yeah.
No, right, yes, exactly.
Yeah, that was great.
So something to just increase our sense of terror or dread, I guess.
Yeah. I agree. And then we have a question from Anthony Gonzalez, who says, in a straight up fight, could the Vale take the Golden Company? We're not really clear on what the Vale's strength is right now, but they haven't lost a lot of manpower. They definitely sent a significant force north. But let's assume they're at full strength. Full strength, they would be larger than the Golden Company, but there would be a lot of fighters in that army who would not be up to par. The average Golden Company soldier would be vastly superior to even a lot of Westerosi knights. So I would go with the Golden Company, I think, but it would be close. I think they're mixed types of units. They have better archers, especially if they have their elephants. Come on, but hard to say. But I would lean Gold Company for sure there. Thomas Pappas says, because it doesn't get any better than spending the night with History of Westeros and Radio Westeros. Well, thank you, buddy. Great to see you at Ice and Fire Con. Thank you for the support, and thanks for the shirts. I'll be wearing them the next several weeks on our show here, and everybody else will get to see them too. Chris Trombley, Night King being killed, how much will magic be a factor in the world going forward? Yeah, that's a good question. It's the chicken and the egg thing? Is magic come from them, or do they come from it? What do you think, Lady Gwen? Like, you can relate the comet and other concepts to this if you want.
Well, it is, I guess, we're dealing with what's always been thought to be a low-level magic world, although magic has been increasing in that world. Certainly, if the Night King is destroyed, and perhaps if the dragons are sacrificed in the process, we could see a similar scenario to, I'm going to go right back to Lord of the Rings because I love it, and we know George loves it, and he's referenced it in terms of where his ending is going, at least in general terms, where, the age of magic is over. in the world. And then now comes the age of men, and there is, magic will either be, catastrophically over or just gradually fade out of the world. And I definitely could see that being how things go in the end of this story.
That is something I hope the show touches on, and certainly the books will, because George even says that there will be maybe not an answer necessarily, but a resolution to the climate, to the winters rather, to the strange seasons. And that seems it's got to be a magical thing, right? So let's move on here. JC asks, is there a way to rationalize why the Night King had to personally come for Bran? That's my biggest issue with the episode. I get it. I think the Night King was created to be a creature of hate. I think the children maybe have imbued their hatred of humanity in him because he was a human, and that would be a way to sort of steer him towards the purpose, which is they wanted him to be a weapon. And it seems like that weapon got out of control. It had some unintended consequences, but ultimately he was a weapon sent to destroy humanity, so it makes sense that he would hate them. And he wants this. It's just his triumphal moment. He wants to kill. He's got personality. He's not an automaton. He smirks. He does, he come at me, bros. He doesn't have a deep character personality, but he's not like a robot. So he does have like a sense of, I've been waiting for this revenge for 8,000 years or something like that. So I think I can get why he would want to do it personally, even though he's like a monster. What do you think, Lady Gwen?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, certainly, especially given what Bran reveals his role to be, that he's basically the repository of human memory and knowledge. Without him, you would see humanity perhaps enter into this time of chaos, where men forget everything, like we heard in that great quote about after the last long night. So if you want to bring destruction and chaos, it's nothing like, pull out the hard drive and, and everything's going to fall apart, right?
Yeah. Let's just briefly talk about the crypts. We're kind of running out of time here. Just to say that we did an episode on the crypts of Winterfell, and I think the crypt scene is going to be massively different in the books. I don't think this was that great of a scene action-wise. There were some great character moments. Lady Gwen, real quick, talk to us about Tyrion and Sansa.
Tyrion and Sansa in the crypts had some good moments. Tyrion invokes the Battle of Blackwater. I was waiting for a classic Sansa moment, singing. Okay, maybe there are reasons why not to sing. Maybe she's outgrown singing. They're trying to depict her loss of hope. She's quite a different person. Maybe they just simply couldn't be making any noise, but you'd still expect Sansa to be doing something to encourage people, and they didn't really show that. So that was a big disappointment to me. Probably my biggest of this episode. And I've talked about it a few times in places around. But I understand the reasons why the show also had to show her feeling hopeless or helpless. Narratively, the callback would have been very satisfying and in keeping with Tyrion's Blackwater reference and other callbacks to that episode or that part of the story. Not to mention her own character development. We shouldn't forget that Sansa's weapon is her courtesy. Her courtesy is her shield, and she uses her words in the same way that Arya uses a sword or violence. That's the sort of the dichotomy between them. So I really would have liked to see more of them focusing on that aspect of Sansa's personality.
Right on.
But just that moment when they held the hands and moved out armed with their little obsidian daggers to protect the people that were with them was, on a rewatch, simply breathtaking. I mean, it's a small moment. It's not exactly what we may have hoped for Sansa's character, but it was a moment, and I definitely appreciated it.
Joe Buckley points out that the episode when this happens in the books, to keep in mind, it will be really dark. It'll add to the creepiness of the scene, as the crypts won't be nearly as well lit as they were in the show, which is funny to think about the crypts being well lit when so much of the episode wasn't.
Yeah, right. And remember, John has a dream about being in the crypts and then the lights going out.
Oh, I forgot about the lights going out part. Good call.
Yeah.
So you wrote here that we should ask whether we ship Tyrion and Sansa in the books.
Well, I think a lot of people are talking about that. And, we have to remember that in the book, Tyrion has done some awful things, and maybe Sansa deserves better. But here, they show them kind of becoming friendly. And so, I've always kind of gotten a vibe that there might be something more to their story together in the books. But I think that it's equally as likely that it will be a kind of like what happened here, that they'll just, they say, well, we would have been great together. Let's be friends, but it's not meant to be, at least where they come to some sort of commonplace where, they don't hate each other. I don't think they ever really did. But.
Right on. I agree. Apparently there was a scene in the show of them actually fighting the Whites, but they cut that for time.
Yeah.
It's at 19 minutes in.
About 19 minutes in, she says. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on. Dany and Jon, we're going to be done really soon here. Real quick, just wanted to say that Dany's reaction to her Khalasar being wiped out was a great moment of conflict, and it's a good example of the old military adage that no plan survives first contact with the enemy, and that's exactly what happened. As soon as the Dothraki ran into that army of the dead, the plan changed.
Yeah. I mean, you can see it. I didn't pick up on it the first time because there's so much going on. And the first time I watched it, I didn't. But you see it in her face. She is not about to let her Khalasar. Like, you see the full realization of that. Those are her people going out there, and she has the power to help them. And she's not about to let that happen. So once again, with Dany, we see this theme of self-sacrifice. We see this in her arc a lot in the books. But I will say, even though she kind of steps out of the plan, she does come back and save Jon's life at least twice.
Right on. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. She does. She still protects him. It's interesting to think about what might be going through her head as far as some of these other things. But the whole Jon Dany stuff is certainly going to rear its head in the last 3 episodes, I would assume. So we'll wait on that.
Yeah.
Super chat from Joe Kraft. Hey, buddy. Good to see you on here. One of my favorite people to talk baseball with on Facebook. No question attached, so we'll move on. Let's go ahead and move to the outro here. We have some things that we didn't quite get to, but most of it we covered, and the other things we can pick up on another time. We have some things we can pick up on Saturday. There's always plot lines that aren't finished yet, and we can always keep talking about them as they move a little farther down. So let me just say a few bits of thanks. Thanks, Lady Gwen, for being here, and I guess we'll be seeing you next Wednesday as well.
Will do. Yeah, I will be here
right
for
on.
The duration.
Remember, again, folks, I put the link to Radio Westeros' YouTube in the description of this episode. You can find it there. Please go subscribe and maybe check out their Long Night episode or their Melisandre episode if you haven't, or re-listen to it if you already have. Valar re-listen-us. Valar re-watch-us. Looks like one more super chat snuck in here just before I was getting ready to move on. Let's take care of that real quick. From Danelle Peoples, do you think there will be any explanation/resolution regarding the bearded Night King figure in the cave paintings? Probably not. No, I would love them to do that, but I think that was kind of just a depiction of like a boss White Walker, like one of the original conversions. If they didn't do that, but I'm not really sure what to make of that. I'm not sure if that was a Night King figure rather than just another one of the others, or maybe he just shaved.
Right. Got a more modern hairdo.
Yeah, he wanted to look cool. He's like, oh, this beard was cool 8,000 years ago, but it's out of style now. Super chat from Brian Decker. No question. Thank you, Brian. Okay, let's say some thanks. Thank you to Michael Klarfeld for the for the video intro and the maps. Thanks to Joey Townsend, Jesse Coel for our music. Thanks to Ashea for wearing so many hats at once, writing, handling the chats, handling the technology. Super... so much to say. So much thanks to Ishido Ashea. She does so much. And she still has this tailbone issue, so it's painful for her to sit here. So really, it is a serious sacrifice for her to do these live streams right now. She's a Sora. So thanks you, everybody. We had a great turnout again today. We're very thankful for that. We'll be back again soon. Here are some patron shout-outs for y'all. Now let's move on to that and say goodbye. Thank you to our peers of the realm. The mysterious BR is Hand of the King. The Smiling Wolf is Lord Stephen Stark of the Broken Tower, soldier, scholar, philosopher, diplomat, hand of the Queen Ashea, who is known as the best. Lord Jim the Fortuitous of Wars and Politics of Ice and Fire blog, Warden of the West. Lord George Stormsville the Cunning, Lord of Chiliad and Warden of the East. Cabeth the Unfrozen, Lord of the Bricks and Castle Crimson Light, is Defender of the Old Gods and Warden of the North. Lady Kelly McMath of Covington is Lady of the Villa Hills and Crescent Springs, Warden of the South. Lord James Tuttle, King of the Stepstones and the Narrow Sea, Commander of the Royal Fleet, consisting of the Narrow Fleet, led by Flagship Caraxes, and the Bloodstone Fleet, led by Flagship Prince Daemon. King Beyond the Wall, Sidney Jesse, is the Fallborn, Lord of Bluespring and the Haunted Forest, wields a dagger of dragonglass, and the Valyrian steel blade Red Frost. Our small council includes Lord Daniel the Sneaky Russian, Master of Ships, Grand Maester Viajames, Lord Benjen of House Hornwood, Master of Laws, Lord Fabian Flowers, the Bastard of Greenshield, is Master of Coin, Lord Johann of House Orcos is called Shadowhawk, he is Master of Whisperers. Also, a shout out from Denise of Lazar, who says, so for Rabea and her backers, I'm going to lay a lot out. I have the Orange Shore. My fleet will basically control the coast along the disputed lands. I am not abandoning my seat on the council, as I am liberating those under the yoke of slavery and showing them that the Lord of Light is the path to follow. So, a challenge has been issued there. That is against the Queen's High Council, Rabea Star Eyes, Lady of Waves and Mistress of Ships, Captain of the Iron Shadow Cat. In the shadows, we bear our claws. She is ready to defend her seat with a full fury of everything she can muster, and this will not be a simple fight. We'll see how it goes. Bloody Ben Blackwood is our Master of Whisperers. Our Master of Coin is Lady Laura of House Brandos. Grand Maester Elizabeth is middle daughter of Lyanna Mormont, First Lady to forge both the Silver and Valyrian Steel Link. And our King's Justice is Sir Troy the Steady, wielder of the Valyrian Steel Blade Fate. Lady Direliz of Castle Naki is the Alpha Patron. Lord Dan of the Red Mountains and Castle Great Bell is Breaker of the Second Stone. Lord Skip of the Veldt is Lord of Castle Ganges. Gregor the Toasty, Lord of the Bread Fort. Alicia Everlasting of the Green Blood, Lady of Desert Rose. Lord Ryan of Castle Stonegate, Guardian of the Rocky Mountain Pass. Lord Garen de Haviland is of Devil's Hand Keep. Ashlyn Winter of the Hawk's Eye is Lady of Castle Skyfall. Lady Mikkel of Moonacre is leader of the Werewood Protectorate Alliance. The Lord of the Halls of Castle Hillcrest is wielder of the Valyrian Steel Machete Everglazed. Lord Alistair Whitaker is Lord of the Dawnhold. Lord Bemmy Snugglebunny is Guardian Ranger of the Hidden 100-Acre Werewood. Lord Brian the Defender is Lord of the Spear Fort and the Freelands, last scion of Clan McCulloch, Strength and Courage. The Basher of the Wolfswood is First Forester of the Old Gods, sworn to House Ironwerewood. Listen for the silence. Connor the Dungeon Master, Lord of Catamount Keep and Guardian of the Smoky Mountain Pass. Lady Baelish, Dark Widow of Harrenhal. Nevesta the Twin-Hearted, suspected skin changer and holder of Castle Carahelm. Sir Valentin of House Jen, creator of the Game of Predictions. Lady Lyanna Kelly of Wolf Island, protectoress of the Steelhold. Casey Stark of House Acres. Lady Kay of House Archer, Lady of Earthdog Hall, Huntress of the Wolf's Wood. Lady Raywin of House Dilsdane, the Star Spear. Peter Rivers, the Pale Dragon, and heir to Bloodraven. Our King's Guard is led by Lord Miriam R., backed up by Sir Dolores D., longest tenured White Sword. Willa Crowsbane, Guardian of White Tree, First Lady of the Free Folk. Sir Dean the White is Knight of the Black Star. Sir Jord of House Pepsi is the Beverage Knight. Gregor the Snow is called Snow Bear, a Bastard of Winterfell. Lord Captain Commander Hama Helminth is the Sellsword Sentinel, leader of the Queen's Guard. Alexander of House Atreides is from the Seat of Dune. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Becca the Bard is Songbird of the North. Michonne the Melodious is Star of Old Town, Minds over Masters. Sir Rambo is Knight of House Gannon, First Blood. Sir Leon of House Walker is wielder of the twin Valyrian Steel Blades Fire and Ice and the Werewood Bow Rain. Amber the Adamant is the Knight of Mist and Mother of Squids. And last but not least, our History of Westeros Night's Watch is led by Lord Commander Benjen Umber, the Silent Giant, wielder of the Valyrian Steel Greatsword Winter's Kiss. First Builder Maegor Snow is a.k.a. Maegor the Cool, the Fire and the Snow. First Steward Sir Jurion is of the Torrentine, called Pale Wind. First Ranger Sir Source Delica of House Gramercy is certainly last, but certainly not least. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see y'all next time. We'll get that bonus episode out soon. We got that Max Brooks interview coming out soon as well. It's got to get that edited. Valar rewatch us. Valar reread us.